to it, a move that could topple Netanyahu's coalition. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
California fire officials say there is progress fighting some of the deadly Los Angeles area wildfires. The Eaton fire in the Pasadena-Altadena area is now more than half contained. NPR's Kirk Siegler reports researchers at UCLA say the wildfires are more catastrophic because of climate change.
UCLA climate scientists are linking climate change to the extreme dryness in the Chaparral Hills in and around Los Angeles. Their research shows that when the brush fires ignited last week, vegetation was 25% drier than it would have been without factoring in climate change. Scientists say these fires would have still been dangerous, but maybe not quite as big or have seen the intensity or rapid growth. This marks a change in communication lately in the scientific community, which had shied away from tying any one disaster to climate change. But scientists now are pinning specific events like heat waves, hurricanes, and fires directly to rising global temperatures as a result of human activity. Kirk Siegler, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down nearly 40 points. You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. As incoming President Donald Trump pledges to conduct the largest mass deportation in U.S. history, Republican lawmakers in Massachusetts have refiled a bill that would authorize state and local judges to honor detention requests from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, for up to 12 hours if the individual has been convicted of serious crimes. The bill was refiled by State Minority Leader Bruce Tarr of Gloucester. And Harvard University has hired a lobbying firm with ties to several of President-elect Donald Trump's top advisors. The move, which comes just days before Trump's inauguration, marks the most blatant effort yet by Harvard President Alan Garber to prepare for the incoming Trump administration, which has threatened the university with a larger endowment tax and cuts to federal funding. The lobbying firm is Ballard Partners, and Garber says it'll be used to lobby for measures supporting education and educational research. According to reports, the founder-CEO is Brian Ballard, a longtime Trump ally. He served as the Florida finance chairman for Trump's 2016 campaign, later served as vice chairman of his presidential inaugural committee. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey delivers her State of the Commonwealth address tonight beginning at 7. GBH News will carry the speech live here on 89.7 and on the GBH app, as well as across all of our platforms. And we're just getting word that baseball great and broadcasting great Bob Uecker has died. Rest in peace. It is 26 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Eakin. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting from GBH Studio 3 in Brighton and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library with three-time U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky and company. And we're going to have live music Friday as usual. And we're also going to be joined by State Auditor Diana DiZoglio, who is trying desperately to audit the legislature. She'll give us the latest updates. Most voters in Massachusetts want to support her efforts to do that. And Black Voters Matter activist Latasha Brown will join us as well. Good morning, Jim.
By the way, Pinsky is part of Live Music Friday. Are you aware of that?
He
is. I'll explain it to you. You'll be there. Are you showing up tomorrow?
We're going to put his poems to music?
Just show up tomorrow.
I'll show
We're
up
joined
tomorrow.
now on the phone by Chuck Todd, chief political analyst for NBC News and host of one of Marjorie's favorite podcasts. Mine is ours, but her favorite is the Chuck Toddcast. Hey, Chuck Todd.
Well, how you doing?
We're excellent. Good to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, Chuck Todd. So I know that this deal with Hamas and Gaza and Israel and everything, it's fraught and there are some last minute problems. But I was hoping we could talk, being optimistic, about the collaborative effort between incoming President Donald Trump and outgoing President Joe Biden.
Well, I think this is a reminder that every once in a while in politics, when everybody has the same interests, you can work together. Donald Trump doesn't want to be mired in a Middle East conflict. on his first week in office, right? And Joe Biden would like to walk away by getting this deal. So in some way, so this was a case where they both had. And I'll tell you, Netanyahu, I think, knows he's got to cut this deal because he can't assume Trump's just always going to give him everything he wants, right? I mean, whatever you think of Donald Trump, when you know he's not a reliable partner on whatever it is, right? Yeah. You know that at any moment, sometimes that's an asset and sometimes that's a liability. And I think that was effectively used to essentially get Bibi to the table to agree to this and do it because he can't afford another riff with Trump, right? He already had one before. And, you know, again, Trump is so transactional. He got what he wanted the first time with Israel. I just think that Bibi's got to be careful, and I think that's what helped make this work because you had aligned interests, right? Biden wanting it as a sort of a grace note to leave, but Trump wanting to be able to start his presidency focusing somewhere else.
You know, while behind the scenes, their staffs are working closely together, and I have to say I was impressed by the collaboration. Of course, publicly, they can't do that. Trump on Truth Social, it's all me.
I know.
And then there's this great moment. Biden, I think he's leaving his press thing yesterday, and a reporter asks him a question. You'll hear Biden say thank you, then a reporter yell a question, and if you didn't hear it, listen to Biden's answer. Here it is.
Credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
I don't know if you could hear that. He said, who gets credit for this, President, you or
Trump,
Trump? So it lasted for a second. You know, on the merits of this thing, though, is the holdup, the whole issue, apparently, about whether Israel gets to decide which prisoners, Palestinian prisoners who are accused of murder get released and which don't. Is that likely to hold up this thing that was so hopeful just 18 hours ago?
Yeah, it is. And not only that, this is a reminder. I mean, this is why Hamas is so hard to deal with sometimes. And look, it looked like everything was agreed to. Trump and Biden announced it, and now Hamas is trying to, take advantage of this a little bit. So, I mean, that's why these announcements are so precarious. You better have everything signed. And the fact they don't have everything signed, like our friend Bill Belichick, who apparently has not yet signed his contract with the University of North Carolina.
Yeah.
When you don't have anything signed, you just never know what can happen next.
Excuse me, Mr.
Sorry,
Belichick
I just
said.
saw that Belichick, I know.
He said, "I am not here to quit." You heard him say that, did you not?
Right, but can you quit something you haven't agreed to?
I guess you might be able to do that. Maybe we'll get to football a little later. We're talking to Chuck Todd. So, speaking of Biden last night he did his farewell kind of deal, and he talked about the concern about an oligarchy of the ultra-rich. And I knew sort of in the back of my head there were a number of billionaires, rather odd, in a cabinet.
Right.
There are 12, apparently, with potential conflicts, and real conflicts in terms of investments and ownership up the you-know-what. What's your takeaway on this?
Look, I think I look at this big picture and it feels like if you've spent any time reading Teddy Roosevelt biographies, okay, we are literally repeating what happened with McKinley, right? What happened at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. We were a similar moment, right? You had massive technological advancements. You had these huge the robber barons, they were called then, right? Today it's the tech bros, however you want to call it. But we were and it was clear, like the country was making advancements fast, and all of a sudden these folks had power, and it culminated, I would argue, it essentially culminated with the Teapot Dome scam. Yes, Teddy Roosevelt came out and said, we got to get on these guys. Part of it, I think, was his own political motivation because he was once on the side of them, right? But in some ways it took somebody of their class to sort of beat them back. But that's, I look here, it's like it's stunning how much we're repeating what happened with this, with this drive with AI and this sort of next generation of sort of industrial advancement that we're headed into. But, I do think this is one of those things where the country will suddenly, this will be a problem. The question is when, not, it's not if but it's when. When does the country notice and not like this. We know they don't like uber wealthy people generally, but they do like them individually, right? There's this weird thing, right? We want to tax the crap out of them, but we love Elon Musk, right? Whatever it is, right? We admire, we're aspirational people. But I think this is going to, I do think that if you ask me, if you wake me up from a coma in 5 years and you said, boy, the Trump era ended badly. Why did it end badly? I went, the billionaires. Everybody turned on the billionaires, right? It's that mindset. And I think that's where we're headed. I do think that this is going to end up leading to a populist revolt. But we're just not there yet. People have to feel negatively impacted by the economy or negatively impacted, by those things. And we're not there yet, but I think that risk is super high. It is super high, and there's no interest in the Republican Party right now to rein these guys in. Other than Steve Bannon. Here's the irony here. You guys,
yeah.
I'm not kidding. I think Bannon is I think he's genuine on this. I think he does fear too much power in the hands of super wealthy people, okay? I think you guys have to be prepared to start agreeing with Steve Bannon more than you want to. It's going to make him comfortable.
So because we've had the Pam Bondi sitting down before Congress, and before that we had Pete Hegseth sitting down before Congress, you talk about Republicans being in no mood to, and some Democrats being in no mood to go against Trump's appointees. These two look like they're going to just sail on through?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, I think what we found out, there was a good piece I read about how that I think Democrats are making a mistake trying to highlight the personal character flaws with these folks, because we already know the public doesn't care about that. I think the mistake with Hegseth, I thought David Brooks wrote a good piece today.
That was a good piece. Yes.
Said, guys, you took your eye off the ball.
Yeah.
Totally, you could have probably exposed him more effectively as totally unqualified for this job by asking him about the job.
Yeah.
Right? And I get it, right? The instinct is to, look, I think that Democrats are making a mistake. They're putting up their first paid ads against members of Congress attacking Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And you're like, guys, you need to get your head out of your you-know-what. Guess who the most popular pick is with the country of Trump's cabinet officials? It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So, I don't think you fully, what offends many sort of Democrats doesn't offend the country on a whole. So you ought to, but what would offend the country is if they were actually disqualified on the merits, right? And I do think Democrats need to recalibrate how they criticize, and they need to go back to actually what they used to do pretty well, which is focus on the job portions of these conversations rather than the personal character.
Yeah, we were going to do that. I have to say, make an admission here. We intended to focus on the job qualifications of Hegseth, but Marjorie and I decided we had to focus on the personal behavior out of loyalty to his mother. So or at least who his mother used to be,
but with RFK, I mean, a lot of his opinions about we're talking later today about the bad things in bacon and all these hyper-processed foods, and that's one of the areas where I think he gets a lot of agreement from the scientific community and certainly the nutritional community. But where do they go if they want to dissuade or get him not in if he is popular, RFK? Do they just talk about vaccines, or what are they? Or polio?
They let Mitch McConnell talk about polio, is what they let.
I mean, what's your suggestion?
Look, I certainly think, I do think on that front, but I would be focusing on how much money he's made off of this claptrap, right? That he's ripping people off. I mean, I think that you go to the the fact he's not doing this because he cares about you. He's doing this because he's making a profit. Okay. And, I think that stuff could be slightly more effective on this front. But look, I just think that, I look at the Kennedy disconnect between Washington. I have this test I've been having. People don't believe me when I say, who the most popular cabinet pick is that Trump meant? Who's got the only cabinet pick with truly positive ratings? And they'll say, what, is it Marco Rubio? And I'm like, no, it's not Rubio. It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yeah. And like, what? Right? There's this disbelief. And it's all sorts of people that I've had this Rorschach test with. And I'm like, this to me shows you how fragmented our media landscape really is. There's an entire, wellness community out there that has connected with him. I misread Kennedy. I thought Kennedy was none of the above in these polls. I didn't think he actually, that I knew he had a following among sort of like the kayaker crowd. Okay,
Right.
you know, the crunchy granola kayaker crowd, and it is interesting to me that, you know, his supporters, I think, were Sanders supporters in 16, and
Yeah.
I think he became the gateway. He was the gateway drug to Trump. And, you know, look at a Naomi Wolf. You know, she's a Trumper now, and
That's
she sort
right.
of was, you know, she was a Gore. You know, she was all on the left.
Yeah, big
and
feminist.
Then she sort of got there. It's a fascinating Venn diagram of supporters that Kennedy tapped into. I do think it's one of those things why Trump, everybody else, even people around Trump are going, why are you keeping Kennedy so close? I think Trump understands it. Kennedy was more important to Trump's coalition than any of us have given credit for. And I do think it's why he won the popular vote.
Well, do you think that it's anything to do at all with the Kennedy hangover, or do you think it was the EPA work he did with the lawyer and he was on the right side of the EPA, and the vaccine thing, which a lot of lefties are not keen on
Do you
vaccinating?
think they love that Trump is
Right.
co-opting the whole Kennedy thing? I think that's huge.
I don't know.
Well, I think there's that too. Look, I think it's a little bit of all of it, right? I don't think you can assign one thing, right? There's the Kennedy halo, right? There is that. The halo's real. But you also have his connection with this wellness crowd. I mean,
Yeah.
just go on the internet in
Yeah.
Reddits and all this stuff. Everybody's always, what's the most advertised crap on digital? It's always some sort of, hey, try this. This can help you with your memory, or this
Yeah.
can help you with this. Doesn't have these toxins. I mean, there is, by the way, speaking of something, talk about repeating history. You ever look at old magazine advertisements of the early 20th century? It was the same thing. Magic elixir.
That's
you know.
right.
I mean,
Yep.
the whole invention of Coca-Cola was
Yep.
based on people selling all sorts of bull hockey like Kennedy's doing today that, hey, drink this. It'll cure the cold. Drink this. You'll be immune from everything. And it turns out, no, if you drink this with a little cocaine in it, you'll just have a lot of energy. And your heart
Those are
may
the
explode,
days.
But other than that, you'll be fine. Yeah, I know, right? When you could pop a Coca-Cola and it had actual cocaine in it.
That's right.
You know, yeah, that's just Jim and I. Like that was our '80s. You know, I mean,
Excuse me. So, Chuck Todd, Marjorie and I were talking the other day. Marjorie, in particular, was outraged by the attempt by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, to tie federal aid to people in Los Angeles County and surroundings to raising of the debt ceiling. You wrote, I thought, a really interesting piece on NBC News yesterday, today, whatever it was.
This is a podcast, too.
About the feds and their response, well, the Trump administration. Flesh it out for us.
well, look, I think this is stupid politics with the Republicans. You know, it may make them feel good in their own base constituencies. It's terrible politics. I mean, and I do think Democrats will basically dare the Republicans to do this if they truly try to go down this road. But I don't think you're going to get there. Guess who Donald Trump was meeting with last night in Mar-a-Lago?
Who?
The head of the L.A. Olympic Committee.
Oh,
And this, to me, is going
Yeah.
to
That's a
be the
really
key.
good
And this
point.
is sort of what I wrote, and I really believe this. And frankly, you know, I'm sure any of us with any friends in L.A., you know, you just sort of, you still can't fathom. I can't fathom it. I'm going out there at the end of the month, and I really want to get a firsthand look because you really can't fathom. Just like trying to explain, when I've tried to explain what happened during hurricanes, right? If you've never experienced one, you
Yep.
don't quite get it until you see it. So I do think that the biggest asset that California elected officials have are the Olympics. And I think what you got to do here is if you get Trump rallying around, I mean, Trump's going to be the sitting president for the 28 Olympics.
Yeah.
And I think, and they've already done this, and it was smart for them to do this at this point. Look, he's going to be and he will tell the Republicans to back off on this if they, you know, basically deal directly. And you look what Gavin's doing. You know what Gavin Newsom did yesterday?
What?
Became the first Democratic governor to do the proclamation of putting the flags up on Inauguration Day.
Really? I wasn't aware
I
of that.
know it's been a whole thing. You know, because of Carter's death, it's
Right.
supposed to be, all of our flags are supposed to be for 30 straight days. It's just been a customary thing we've done for dead presidents. Obviously, Trump is unhappy that on Inauguration Day, the flags are going to be at half-mast. So you've had this sort of rolling, you know, first it was, of course, Greg Abbott, right, first governor of Texas. He announced it first. Then all these other Republican governors followed. So, oh, God, can't let Greg Abbott be the only one that does that. So they all promised their own proclamation. And then Gavin did his yesterday. And I thought, look, whatever you think of Gavin Newsom, and I do think ultimately this probably, you know, unless things go swimmingly in the rebuild of L.A., his entire political future is going to be tied with success or failure in rebuilding LA.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of knows it. And by the way, the only way you're going to rebuild LA successfully is if Donald Trump's not working against you. And so I think but I do think if Republicans get caught doing this, first of all, I think it'll divide the party. I do think Southern Republicans, particularly those in Florida and who have dealt with their own natural disasters, aren't going to do this. And I can't believe Mike Johnson, a Louisiana Republican.
That's a good point.
Louisiana, who is a big federal government taker, not a giver, right? California gives more money to the federal government than they take. I do think this is just sort of easy, like right-wing, sort of help with the right-wing based politics for the moment. But I think when push comes to shove, it's just not going to happen because it's terrible politics. It will boomerang badly.
So, Chuck, Todd, we talk a lot on the show about the promised mass deportation. As Homan says, his deportation guy on day one. I'm sort of surprised that 5 days out, we know so little about what the Trump administration is planning. And maybe it's because they don't have a plan. But what are we going to see, do you think, Monday, Tuesday? That's one of the, unlike, grocery prices, now they're going to be hard to deal with. Tariffs, we may phase in over time. Mass deportation, they haven't retreated, at least it appears to me, an inch. What's likely to happen up front?
I think it's jails first. I think they comb people that are already incarcerated in order to be able to have a quick win like that. I think that's the first thing, because everything else is more complicated. Everything else is going to take more time. Everything else, but if you're what is the quote unquote low hanging fruit on that issue? It's deporting those that are sitting in our jails, sitting in prisons, that are that haven't been deported yet. That probably were always going to be deported once they were finished going through our legal system, right?
Which even Democrats would agree with for the most part.
Correct. Right. So that's going to be the question. It's the next level. Are they really going to do this? Are they going to do they're talking about doing at least a sort of raid, a made-for-TV raid, right? But I will be fascinated. There's going to be some major Republican-owned facilities that are going to get raided, or will they? Like, that's a question I have, right? Which is, you look at some of where we know migrants are employed under the table, and it's going to be at a lot of places that are owned by companies that have probably written big checks to Donald Trump. Particularly, I'm talking to the meat packers. That's one, and some of these things. And that's going to be, are they going to essentially pass by those that paid the toll to Trump, right, versus those that didn't? I mean, these are, to me, the questions I'm waiting to watch and see here. But I do think the bigger issue that they're going to pursue is using the bird flu as an excuse to shut the border. And I think that's where they're going to. You saw that story. They're shopping for a virus to justify it. Look, bird flu is probably, it is probably can be. You can make the case that with its threat to the dairy industry and agriculture, you probably could pass court muster on it.
Okay, before
I expect that.
Before you go here, we only have a minute here. I originally was going to ask you to do a Nostradamus thing around the fact your team is out. That's Green Bay. My team is still in Philadelphia. Marjorie's team barely played this season, the Patriots. Yeah. But instead, since you raised Belichick, we were discussing with our sports person from NBC Sports Boston yesterday whether Belichick actually does do something like go to Dallas because the job is now open if Jerry Jones wants him. Do you think he's staying at UNC or is he coming back to the NFL? And if he does, how does he explain it?
I think it would only be for Dallas or Chicago, and I just can't imagine him working for Jerry Jones.
Yeah,
he's a Bill Parcells guy. Parcells tried it for 2 years, and it was terrible, right? And Parcells will, and I think Belichick knows all of that firsthand. I think I've always thought the Bears was the place he'd most likely land if he did another NFL because he's he's an NFL history buff. Here's one of the founding teams. Yeah. He loves, and if he could be the guy to bring the Bears to the Super Bowl, and that would, he'd be a hero in Chicago. the bar is actually kind of low in Chicago. They don't expect ever to succeed there. And I do, from what I hear, he really wants to break down Shula's record.
Yeah, most wins
for all-time
ever.
wins.
Yeah.
And he needs a couple seasons, right?
Yeah.
And if he's not careful, if he doesn't, you know who might grab that?
Andy Reid.
Andy Reid.
Former coach of my hometown team, I should say, before we went to Kansas
Andy
City.
Reid,
Yeah.
By the way, I'm having a depression because I read a horrible stat that said there's only 4 NFL coaches that have ever won a Super Bowl in their 7th year or later as a coach. And my man LaFleur is entering year 7 at Green Bay.
Oh, no.
But you know who one of the 4 exceptions was Andy Reid.
Wow. By the way, for those who don't know why Chuck, a Florida kid, is a Green Bay fan, it's because Miami didn't have the Dolphins when you were a little boy.
Well,
you're right? Is that right?
They did. No. My father outlawed me rooting for the Dolphins.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, right. That's right. I'm sorry.
Wait.
He thought Joe Robbie was ripping off the University of Miami football team, which he was. He took all the concession money from Miami Hurricane football games and pocketed it in Miami, so that was always
It's a good enough reason for me.
These days, the Dolphins owner actually treats Miami pretty well now.
Oh, good.
Shared stadium.
All right.
But back in the 70s and 80s, no, man, Robbie took all the money from the team that was the better football team in that stadium, the Hurricanes, not the Dolphins.
Hey, Chuck Todd, it's great to talk to you again. Talk to you next week.
Thank you,
Be well.
Chuck.
Brother.
Take care.
Bye, guys. Bye,
See ya.
Margie. By the way, I love my mug.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
My smug mug.
Smug mug.
I love it. By the way, when I drink from my left hand, I get one of you staring at me, and I drink, which is Marjorie. When I drink from my right hand, I believe I get Jim staring at me. I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was purposeful, but
Well, all I can say is I'm sure you know why it's called a smug mug.
Yes,
Chuck,
that's
I'll talk
right.
to you soon. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, Chuck.
bye, guys.
See ya.
We have been speaking with Chuck Todd. He's the chief political analyst for NBC News and host of the Chuck Toddcast, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. And it is a great podcast for political junkies. Okay, after a quick break, we are less than a week out from this theoretical TikTok ban. Though the incoming Trump administration seems interested in finding a way to keep the app available, and we learned the guy that runs the company there is going to be a place of honor at the inauguration.
Essentially, with the
president.
With the other.
Yeah, that's right.
It's unbelievable.
So I don't know. That would indicate that maybe if you're a TikTok user, Trump can do something for you, or if not, are you ready to say goodbye? Is it the right thing to get rid of TikTok, or are we worse off spending more time on apps owned by the disgusting Elon Musk and alpha male wannabe Mark Zuckerberg? Your calls and texts are next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Boston College law professor Michael Cassidy. In his debut novel, he takes a real-life cold case as the inspiration for a thriller situated in the legal and cultural realities of today, and a perfect recipe for teaching. Meet the RISD faculty member who's using cooking to teach industrial design. Plus, Andres Holder of the Boston Children's Chorus previews their upcoming concert on MLK Day. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And The Lyric Stage, presenting Crumbs from the Table of Joy. Set in 1950s Brooklyn, two sisters mourn the loss of their mother with Hollywood films, daydreams, and lots of cookies. January 10th through February 2nd at Lyric Stage Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browding, Margeregan, live from our GBH studio and streaming in Brighton and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are back at the library tomorrow. On Sunday, the Chinese-owned video sharing app TikTok is expected to shut down in America after, I'm sure you know this, a law signed by President Biden in April orders the app's company to sell to a U.S.-based firm or, as I said, close it down. The company is called ByteDance. They have not sold the app, and now TikTok and the feds are in some complicated dance. The feds under Trump, by the way, I should say, because Trump, who used to hate it, now loves it because he thinks TikTok helped him get elected. Meanwhile, thousands of TikTok users are apparently flocking to another Chinese-owned video sharing app called RedNote. to spite, I guess, the odious Mark Zuckerberg and his knockoff version of TikTok called Reels. In any case, 877-301-8970. 9 months ago, a lot of people were having this conversation about the risks of a Chinese-owned company having access to our data. But now that the shutdown is imminent, a lot of people are talking about First Amendment rights and keeping it open. So we want to know, one, are you one of the 170 million users of the app in the United States and you're upset? Or are you optimistic that the idea of the ban will help you finally kick or your kid or your parents' social media addiction? The number is 877-301-8970 to call or text, 877-301-8970. I said this yesterday. I don't know who we were. Oh, Andrea Notko we're talking about. I don't think I'd been on TikTok 5 times till the till the whole debate in Congress about shutting this thing down arose. And then I made the mistake of doing it. And to say it is addictive, it's not supposed to be addictive for middle-aged and older people. It's supposed to be addictive for young people. Yet once you start, you cannot pull away from this thing. And I have to say that is maybe that causes me to be somewhat biased. The two arguments. The one argument is this is a First Amendment question. You shouldn't shut it down. But I should have said the Supreme Court is about to rule. But I think today, potentially, arguably, they're going to rule that the shutdown legislation is constitutionally permissible. And the national security arguments that are made by those who want to shut it down, the majority of Congress and Joe Biden, are ridiculous. And let me just say briefly, without boring you, is one, the virtually everything they can get, they could buy on the open market here in the United States anyway. All this data is available. And secondly, why are we not shutting down all these other companies that are marketing and then grabbing and then selling our data? And we're not doing that. It's sort of an anti-Chinese kind of thing. And so I am on the side of keeping it open. And there are some circuitous things being pursued by Trump to do that, which we're not going to bore you with today. But the bottom line is, are you upset that as of Sunday, if nothing changes, TikTok is shutting down? Or are you gleeful, or do you not give a damn? 877-301-8970. I'm guessing you're in the not give a damn category.
Well, I'm kind of a Luddite when it comes to this stuff. I managed to get off Facebook. I haven't tweeted in 4 years. I mean, I have.
Well, you're
tweeted.
waiting for the right moment.
Yeah,
I'm
waiting for the right moment.
Yeah.
That's right. So I am Luddite-like in that, and I'm not on TikTok. So, but
there are a lot of Luddites on TikTok. You don't need to be like a high-tech expert.
There's a lot of people that are making money on TikTok. They have companies on a TikTok story this morning about the mother that runs around. She's vacuuming with a kid and the infant strapped to her back, and she's doing the dishes and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people just love it. They look at all these videos and think it's great. I think it's like clickbait. I'm not sure it's going to add much to my life.
I don't agree, by the way. I think there's a lot of really, first of all, entertainment is not a horrible word. We like to try to be entertaining too.
There's a lot of good. Anyway. The bottom line is I'm not upset about it.
I was about to say I think it's a travesty. I know it's maybe a little. I think it is. I mean, I think the civil liberties union types who are saying it's a First Amendment, it's a speech issue. I tend to agree with them. The national security argument is ridiculous.
Well, the thing I don't understand is we've said before is I think you can get anybody's information about anything already.
I just said that. You can go buy it.
Exactly.
You could go buy it.
You don't even have to buy stuff. You can just go online as not even some skilled kind of person, or you can pay a little extra and get a little bit more extra if you want to get people's Corey records and everything else. So I kind of think that, but again, the other thing is, if there are millions and millions and millions of Americans who love it, have fun,
170 million.
Yeah, I feel bad taking it away from those people.
877-301-8970. The TikTok shutdown is imminent, even though Donald Trump wants to try to prevent it. I'm not sure how he does this, if he does it. And by the way, again, we still don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do, but everybody who watches the argument said the First Amendment argument was not very persuasive to them, and as a result, they are likely tomorrow, to rule that the law banning TikTok, unless it was sold to a U.S.-based company, and by the way, that could be Elon Musk, even though it's unlikely, the shutdown will happen on Sunday.
I forgot to mention that you and I, of course, are on TikTok.
Yes.
TikTok.com,
well, the show is on TikTok.
At Boston Public Radio, so there's a lot of TikToks on our page there, Jim.
By the way, do you know, I wasn't going to say this because it's arrogant. When we opened our account, it went from 170 million users to 170 million too. Did you know that? It was incredible. Let's go to Tim in Onset. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, Tim and Marjorie.
Hey.
I'm a 71-year-old guy, and I love TikTok. There is so much talent, so much information, and once you get the algorithm right and you get to see the stuff that interests you, and I'm very interested in all kinds of stuff, politics, music, etc. This is a travesty that they might shut this down. I can't believe that in America we're not all just up in arms about the idea of saying we're going to shut down communication that is really good for people.
I pretty much agree with everything you said. And by the way, I was a skeptic until I'm not quite addicted, but 2 nights ago, I was about to go to bed. I looked at a couple of videos, and 45 minutes later, I was still doing the same thing. And mine weren't really serious ones, but I really had a great time. And I sort of like having a great time. So, Tim, I'm with you. Thanks so much for your call. 877-301-8970. I want to repeat, Trump, again, in 2020, wanted to shut it down. It was a disaster. And then all of a sudden, one of his major fundraisers is deeply involved in ByteDance. And he was told by his staff that TikTok helped him in his reelection campaign. So all of a sudden, he's done a 180 and trying to figure out how to rescue this thing. 877-301-8970.
Here's Peter from Quincy. My wife and I are proud TikTok refugees have begun the transition to Red Note. That's the company you mentioned before, Jim.
Yeah, Chinese.
We will be deleting all of our Facebook and Instagram profiles just to spite Mark Zuckerberg, who of course owns Facebook and Meta, and he's
the real thing. But can I ask you a question? I have a feeling we're gonna have to have a listener answer the question. Red Note is a Chinese-owned company, right? And the concern, I'm quite sure that's true. And
yes.
If that's the case, and the concern is, I believe the law in China that allows the government to demand any data they choose from any Chinese company. Why doesn't the same fear exist in Congress, the alleged fear exist in Congress about Red Note? And why aren't they next week going to outlaw Red Note just like they outlawed TikTok? Maybe I'm missing something, and if I am, give us a buzz and explain it to me. 877-301-8970. Donna on the road texts, I've never ticked nor talked, so I don't care.
Somebody else, I've lost the text now, but they think this is anti-Chinese racism. Anti-Asian racism.
Well, I think it's definitely an anti-China thing. Don't you think so? They want to show, members of Congress want to show they're tough on China. I mean, and probably there is a racist element.
But the new sheriff in town, Donald Trump, is obviously, as we said before, become a fan of TikTok.
Well, a guy who fomented anti-Asian racism as well as anybody during COVID. So talk about ironic sort of shifts. Let's go to Peter.
Oh, here's a good point.
Peter, 1 second.
We heard about this before, and I think this isn't just TikTok.
What's that?
What concerns me, says a texter, is the Chinese should not allow the same version of TikTok to be shown to their minors. I wasn't sure if that was true of TikTok, but I know that they have an age thing about what kids can see on social media, and they think it's very damaging to children. The version they allow is more educational and positive for young brains. And again, I'm not sure if that's unique to TikTok, but I've read that before, where they do regulate the age of users.
By the way, an anonymous texter has a brilliant text watching on YouTube, says, I love the split screen now that we're streaming from here. If you get a few more guests and things for people to look at, you can rename the show The Browdy Bunch, which we are actually contemplating that, but Marjorie's resisted. Robert and Hingham, well, Peter, we were going to get to you. I'll get back to you in a minute. I'm sorry. Robert and Hingham, welcome.
Hi. It's just this whole conversation around the TikTok ban, I fail to understand how Facebook, Twitter, X, all of these apps that are U.S. held are doing the exact same thing with our data. This is ridiculous that we want to have a conversation about the CCP having our data. What about Mark Zuckerberg having our data and manipulating?
I think that is the single best argument, which shows the fraudulent nature of the legislative campaign, congressional campaign against this. I think you're 100% right. I think it's just, it's total. Are you a user, by the way?
Absolutely. Every day.
Yeah.
So how much would you miss it?
Huge. It's become my main search engine. You can pull up videos of any location in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Reviews of products that you can trust.
Well, I don't know if I go that far. I'm always suspicious of a lot of things.
Robert,
I always
for
like
the
to
call.
look at
Appreciate
the source. So much of online you got to be really careful of.
By the way, could one of our colleagues look up the thing that Robert just talked about that I mentioned before but he mentioned better. What was the argument by either Joe Biden, who signed this, or lead congressional sponsors of this as to why they weren't banning every platform like this?
Well, it has to do with the TikTok being owned by a Chinese company, right? I mean, that was the argument, that we want it to be
But if
sold
they're collecting
to an
the
American
data,
company.
yeah, but the Chinese could buy the data that's being collected by all the other companies.
And you can sit at home, even if you are a Luddite, in your little computer and find out an awful lot of things about your neighbors or people you don't like or your ex-spouse or something like that.
Don't be so humble. You say you're I've been calling Marjorie. I call Marjorie more often than she'd like. And starting a week ago, I go automatically to voicemail, and I figured it was intentional. It turns out we learned it wasn't intentional. She had inadvertently turned on a do not disturb.
Right.
Tell people who turned off the do not disturb.
I know it's amazing to you, Jim, but I managed to do it all by myself.
Is it amazing to you as well?
No.
Yes, it is.
I think what you learn, and I didn't grow up with computers.
Oh, you didn't?
smartphones
I
and
didn't
all
know that, no.
But most of it is intuitive.
It
and if you
is.
spend a few minutes trying to figure it out, even Luddites like myself can figure these things out.
And by the way, figuring out TikTok, to use your expression, would take you all of about a second after you download the app.
You know
That's
what
about
part
how
of it
long it would
is,
take
I think,
you.
for me, and I can't think I'm the only one.
Yeah.
I need to read so much for the show. I need to watch so many things to read
You like
the show.
having fun?
I like to, yeah.
It's fun.
It-
I
it's-
know
it-
callers are talking about how much they learn and
Right.
education and whatever. That's all hugely important. I find it to be huge fun.
Well, I have fun in different ways, I guess.
Like what?
I don't know what I do.
Okay,
It's-
Peter.
I have no fun.
But something, whatever it is. Peter
Peter
Wellesley.
from Wellesley. Hi, Peter.
Yeah, hi, guys. Listening to this, it's really unsettling to me. I've worked in cybersecurity, that the whole discussion and argument here, and the reason it should be banned has nothing to do with free speech, nothing to do with entertainment. It's security. Marjorie said it right. The issue here is that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. The boundaries between the Chinese government and Chinese companies is very thin. And Jim, your argument that this data is available anyway, I would say is very wrong. There's a lot of data available online, but you can't begin to imagine the kind of intelligence you can infer from the behavior and the things that you do when you're on TikTok, where you are, what you look at, for how long, where you click. That kind of detailed information is not available anywhere. It's all available to TikTok, and the fear is it's going to go right to the government and be used for...
By the way, the only part of what you said, Peter, that I agree with, it is likely that it is going to go right to the government. And I surely don't have what sounds like your level of expertise in national security stuff. But I would say I've probably read 50 stories about this since the original legislation, I think in April or whatever month it was. And virtually every expert I talk about says you're wrong, not me, that you are wrong, that the vast majority of what the Chinese government might be able to get from ByteDance, it can get right now had TikTok not existed. So I respect your opinion, but I just differ. But Peter, we much appreciate your call. Thank you very much. And by the way, Peter is in the majority of members of Congress. They agree with him completely that this is aberrationally bad.
Remember
So
a long time
he's
ago,
not an outlier, Peter.
Seth Moulton, congressman from the North Shore, of course, people know he was a Marine and he combat veteran and all that. He made the point, which was compelling to me, that we don't see what some of these people see in Congress that are on these intelligence committees. And what he saw there convinced him that TikTok was something that should not be, wasn't a good idea.
Well, maybe they better explain it to us a little bit better, I would say. I don't mean that to just Congressman Moulton. I have not been convinced. I am concerned about security, too. I'm really concerned about privacy issues. And I haven't been convinced by anybody that this is necessary.
How things evolve. When they wanted to put those monitors in the Mass Turnpike, when they wanted to put those cameras in the Mass Turnpike, Jim was pretty hysterical. He's worried about cameras in the corners and
No,
everything
it's a
else.
matter. No, wait a second. We have to take a break. But before we do, I am concerned about the omnipresence of cameras. It was not me. Do you remember when they first started putting the whatever it's called, fast lane or whatever it's in, when they pulled down the toll booths? people told us they would not get a transponder. They would rather wait in a line this is before the toll booths came down, for an hour.
I know.
Because the government was going to be
was watching them.
tracking them. And by the way, they probably are.
Yeah.
But, there's sometimes you
Here's
decide convenience matters more.
Here's from Corey in East Hampton, who thinks that...
East what?
East Hampton,
Oh, Hampton, I'm
Massachusetts.
sorry. Okay.
This person thinks that the ban is about a fear of the Chinese government influencing American public opinion. What do you think of that?
I think Derek in the car is right. TikTok would be the only social media platform the U.S. wouldn't be able to control. Can't push propaganda if you don't control it. An excellent point. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to talk about this to the top of the hour. How are you feeling about the possible TikTok ban? Are you happy, upset? How much do you use it? How much does it mean to you? The number is 877-301-8970.
Tens of thousands of people have been killed in Gaza. The territory is in ruins. Meanwhile, the violent shock of the Hamas attack on Israel 15 months ago still reverberates.
Now, a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel stops the fighting, bringing the work ahead into focus. Analysis and perspectives from all sides of the issue next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Comcast, offering Xfinity Mobile, featuring data options that include streaming, browsing, and texting. More information is available at xfinity.com/mobile. And McLean Middleton, a regional law firm with over 100 attorneys and locations in Woburn and Boston, serving clients for over 100 years in the areas of corporate law, tax law, litigation, and estate planning. McLean.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News from our Brighton studio back at the library tomorrow. We're talking about the imminent shutdown of TikTok, which is scheduled for Sunday, despite the efforts of incoming President Trump to try to keep it open. As of the moment, assuming the Supreme Court does what it's predicted to do by Supreme Court watchers and rules that the ban was constitutional, Sunday is shutdown date, and we want to know what your reaction to that shutdown is. 877-301-8978.
Here's Dominic. He says he's very concerned we can't have a global adversary able to control our young people's times and attention to such a great extent.
Okay. Jen in Sagamore Beach. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Good. Listen, I know that we're all probably going to be sleeping better knowing that an agreement has been reached to ban TikTok while the carnage continues to grow in our schools, our houses of worship, our malls, and our movie theaters because we can't reach an agreement on banning assault weapons.
That is a fine
That's
fine
my thought
point.
for the day.
Yeah.
Well, that is a fine point. And I mean, I guess in the extension of that point is they can now say they did something. And you're right, the comparative harm is not even close.
Well,
it's an excellent point,
of course,
Jen.
some of these stories that we've been reading this morning talk about how Trump is going to issue an executive order once he gets into
It's
office.
a law. I read those stories. This is the law of the United States of America. An executive order can't overturn, as far as I know, can't overturn a law.
He can call Pam Bondi and tell him not to enforce the law,
Well,
can he? Isn't that what's going to happen?
But we asked Andy Anatko yesterday that he could do that.
Mhm.
And even if they said we have no plans to enforce the law, Andy's position is that the shutdown still happens Sunday. And Andy knows a hell of a lot more about this than I do.
Okay, well, I'll just read this one little section. It
Please.
says Donald Trump is considering an executive order once in office that would suspend enforcement of the TikTok ban or sale law for 60 to 90 days, buying his administration time to negotiate a sale or an alternative solution.
Yeah, this is the same guy who filed a request or a brief with the Supreme Court, said, could you put your decision on pause? It doesn't work like that. A president can't say, Supreme Court, excuse me, can you give me a couple of more minutes to try to figure this thing
Jim,
out?
Who's going to be enforcing the law once he's
Who?
in office after.
Can I tell you who?
Yes.
I will be enforcing the law.
It's going to be Pam
Pam
Bondi.
Bondi.
Right. Who, it's clear she's going to do whatever he tells her to do.
Yeah,
Isn't
but
that
I'm
fairly
telling you
obvious?
that Andy says even if they were to make a pronouncement, I find it hard to believe. Well, maybe it's not that they're going to publicly announce we're not going to enforce the law. But even if they do, Andy's position is that still. No, I'm not saying they will enforce the law. I'm saying, are they going to openly say I'm not going to enforce the law?
I wouldn't be surprised. What's anybody going to do about it?
Okay, maybe you're right. In any case, Patrick here in Brighton, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
We're good.
So my conspiracy theory here is it's not just Mark Zuckerberg and all the other national social media companies that are. It might just be AIPAC as well, because there's a lot of individual people that are telling their stories from Gaza, and probably AIPAC doesn't want us to hear about those.
Oh, well,
I don't know. Patrick, thank you for the call. I don't know.
Somebody else was worried about, people that are in submarine factories or Quonset and that, having people there using TikTok. I mean, I don't know enough about it to even comment, but they're worried about that kind of thing. Our secretive efforts at building war materials. Tom in the car, thank you for calling.
It's on.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good.
Hey, so listen, I'm 62. I use Facebook, of course, and I like YouTube University. I do not go on TikTok because you.
Wait, we lost you. Say it again.
Why?
Because of what? Why?
I don't do it.
You say it again.
Because it's become an issue. I just avoid it because to me it's equal to the Alexa thing. If the computers are listening and keeping track of what we do every second and every minute, then I don't want any part of it. So,
well, is he going to move to Montana in a cabin, or what are you going to do? Because it's not just.
No. The funny thing is that Facebook and YouTube University are probably doing the exact same thing. So let's not fool ourselves.
By the way, I have to say, I am not quite where you are, but they are all watching us. And I guess if you believe that, which you do, Tom, and which I think I do, then Congress has to act far more broadly than just targeting a Chinese-owned company. But as one of our texters said, and I'm sorry I lost it. Oh, no, Ronnie in Danvers, it's totally performative. Which Ronnie says, I don't know if it's a he or she or they, it's why they didn't go after Red Note. And they did go after TikTok because this is about performance. Tom, we appreciate your perspective. Thank you. 877-301-8997. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because you're talking about being kind of out of touch. Remember years ago when Mark Zuckerberg, before we disliked him so much, was before Congress, and was it the guy Orrin Hatch?
Orrin Hatch
from Utah,
yeah,
who's no longer in the Senate. Obviously,
he's dead too.
Yeah, that's why he's no longer in the Senate. He asked Mark Zuckerberg, did he?
He said to
Zuckerberg,
Zuckerberg, he said something.
Money?
Since users do this for free, how do you make money? And Zuckerberg paused for a second. He said, "Ads, Senator."
Yeah.
Well, by the way, I'm not going to get into this, but one of the great questions in the Supreme Court case from Alito about Pornhub, they're trying to have a lot of these red states in particular want there to be an age verification.
Right.
And there's a free speech issue there too, argue the opponents of this. And Alito's questions showed that they had no idea what he was focusing on. And by the way, technology is another area where I would argue that you said you're a Luddite. I would argue most members of Congress have absolutely no idea what they were talking about, not just the late Orrin Hatch.
Yeah, I think Chuck Grassie's on top of it.
He's like, when you look at, he's chair of that committee, he's like 100. He's not like 100, he's like 90. I mean, really? By the way, the only thing I think I think he's for cameras in the courtroom.
I don't know.
Which is why I have a warm spot. Let's go, he's from Iowa and he's a senator and he's like 90-something.
Chris in the car,
Hi,
thank
Chris.
you for calling.
Hello there.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to remind you that 6 years ago, Trump hated TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
All those kids would buy all the tickets to his rallies and his
that's
speeches
right.
and then not show up.
That's exactly why he hated it. You're right.
And now, somehow, he loves it.
Yeah.
Well, not somehow. We know, I forgot what your story, but you're right.
That's a great
The reason
reminder.
he loves it is because a major donor of his, a big investor, one, and two, because his staff told him, his campaign staff, that TikTok was a real asset to his election campaign. So obviously, but you're totally right.
I
if
had
people don't
forgotten,
remember,
Chris.
people would go on TikTok, and I think other social media platforms do tickets for his events
Yeah.
and then not show up so that they were
Yes, and he even
semi-empty.
ran.
That was pretty brilliant. Wasn't that brilliant? That was incredible.
It was pretty funny.
Chris, that was a great call. Thanks for the memories. We appreciate it.
Okay, we are done. People that are really into TikTok are kind of hanging in the breach here, so we'll see what happens next week. But coming up after the noon news, we're going to be talking with former Massachusetts Public Safety.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And MIT Sloan Executive Education. You can equip yourself with the skills to lead in a rapidly changing world. Courses cover AI, leadership, and data-driven strategy. More at executive.mit.edu. In the Roaring 20s, a group of ambitious railway workers from both Canada and the United States are on track to create the world.
The basic framework is the same. The reason it wasn't primarily, I think, is because the organizing principle of Benjamin Netanyahu's world is to stay in power, and he prioritized, quote-unquote, total victory over Hamas, which he has not succeeded in attaining, rather than returning the hostages.
Aaron David Miller, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. President Biden delivered his formal farewell to the nation from the Oval Office last night. Here's NPR's Deepa Shivaram.
With just 5 days left in office, Biden gave rare remarks from behind the Resolute desk, a location typically reserved for the most important president.
Driven by the fossil fuel industry's fear of competition. And aerial surveys over the Gulf of Maine have detected the presence of dozens of critically endangered North Atlantic right whales this week. The sighting triggered a voluntary slow zone for vessels in the area in an effort to prevent vessel strikes. The videos show the presence of fishing gear, which also puts the whales at additional risk of entanglement. The New England Aquarium reports that scientists documented over 75 right whales in that area on January 12th and 13th. That's a high number of whales for that area of the ocean in wintertime. The 75...
Free and fair election. The FBI, Christopher Wray has said it. The heads of the agencies that report or would report directly to her as AG in the Department of Justice have all said that the election was free and fair. In fact, I think Christopher Wray said it was the most fair election in United States history. She presumes to lead these agencies when she absolutely refuses to acknowledge their expertise and their opinion in deciding that Joe Biden won the election fairly. And it's because the only real test in Donald Trump's view of her qualifications is that she is loyal to him and that she perpetuates the lie. That's the only criteria.
By the way, her response to this, if you guys didn't watch the hearing or see reports, she sidestepped the question repeatedly and said Biden was, quote, duly sworn in. I'm laughing, even though it's a really serious... You were so right. The fact that one refusal to respond affirmatively, yes, he won the election, is
because the Department of Justice, of course, enforces civil rights laws. It enforces voting laws. In Florida, she was against the Affordable Care Act. She tried to get rid of that. She was against gay marriage. You remember when she was AG down in Florida, she began an investigation of Donald Trump, and then she backed off after he gave her a huge campaign contribution.
$25,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so...
But she also was one of his attorneys. Again,
that's right, personal attorney.
In addition to Blanche, and I think his name is Cove, the other two that have represented him in cases where he is being personally accused of either criminal or civil violations. They are now going to presume to represent all of the rest of us. First of all, it's an inherent conflict of interest. Basic conflict of interest law says this, right? We leave it to the advice and consent of the Senate to make the obvious decision that this is a conflict of interest and that these people are unqualified. But it's very clear to me that they have the Republican majority has absolutely no intention of doing anything other than knuckling under. She's also part of the America First Policy
That's
Institute.
right.
She's the head of the legal arm of the America First Policy Institute. This is an entire country being subverted to the will of a handful of people, a relative handful of people with an agenda, and in particular within that, loyalty to Donald Trump no matter what he does.
By the way, one last thing we should add to this refusal to answer thing. Senator Coons from Delaware asked her something like, what would you do if Trump gave an unethical or an illegal order to the, quote, independent Justice Department? And she said it was a hypothetical. And by the way, there's certain hypotheticals I would agree that as a nominee you don't answer. This
Right.
is not one of those hypotheticals. If he tells you to do something illegal, chief law enforcement officer in the United States of America,
Right.
what will you do? Oh, well, it's a hypothetical. I can't answer that. In any
She
case,
also-
I'm sorry. For those who are not paying
answered-
attention, the likelihood of her not only getting confirmed
Oh, yeah.
is about 100%. The likelihood of her
Right.
getting a decent number of Democratic votes is actually pretty decent, too.
Well, the Vermont senator, Peter Welch, they talked about her charm offensive, and he thought the meeting with her was very good, says she's very direct, very responsive. She's got a lot of experience. You have to wonder if he asked her who won the election in 2020, if she was, apparently he didn't, because she would not be direct about that, I don't think, if she wasn't in front of the other senators.
Andrea, you were going to say one more thing. I'm sorry.
Well, Senator Padilla asked her about birthright citizenship,
Yeah.
which is in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
Verbatim.
It is what, right, the entire country is built on it. And she said, whether or not, she had an issue with it, her response was, I will study the 14th Amendment. And he said to her, you want to be the Attorney General of the United States and you still have to study the 14th Amendment? I mean, this is the level of clown show we're talking about here. And just because she is not Matt Gaetz, who was the absolute dregs, she's now benefiting from the fact that Matt Gaetz was so over the top unqualified that she, just being merely unqualified, is somehow benefiting from that.
You know what else?
I'm beside myself.
Let me be catty and superficial here for a second,
I know
too.
what you're gonna do.
We've had Hegseth, clearly a Fox News anchor guy, the way he looks, people at Fox look a certain way. She looks like she could be a Fox News anchor. She may be the first Attorney General nominee who had the most incredible false eyelashes I've ever seen in my entire life. But that's what Fox News anchors wear, false eyelashes when they're women. A lot of news anchors, in fairness, wear those too.
Okay.
But you wouldn't think that would be something the Attorney General would feel the need.
That was what Marjorie
to wear.
said, not me, Jim
Yeah.
Browdy. Speaking of loyalty, Andrea Cabral, apparently at the National Security Council, they're doing loyalty interviews with existing staff. And this is one of these things, by the way, where if you know anything about government, they're careerists, people who don't give a damn if you're a Republican, a Democrat, a conservative, a liberal. I'm serving my country. And if you're the person who's picked, who's qualified, and you're my boss, I'm going to do my job. But apparently, they are now doing loyalty interviews. And if you are not loyal to Donald Trump, forget what your experience and skills are, you are out. And they apparently are planning on doing a clean sweep, which is troubling on two fronts. One, the loyalty oath part of it. And two, losing all of the expertise that goes with lifelong civil servants who are totally committed to serving their country, no?
Yes, you're right. And but the Trump administration has never been one to fret over a brain drain. In their administration, they just don't. But here's the part that everything about this floors me. This in particular. Yes, certain employees serve at the will of the president, right? So you can be fired for any reason.
Mm-hmm.
It is incredibly rare to be public about the fact that you are firing people based on their exercise of their First Amendment rights. It is illegal, quite frankly, to do that, right? Now, they're starting with the vendors for the NSC who have 1 and 2 year contracts. They're starting with people, they're not starting with the careerists yet, but Representative, this congressman from Florida, Mike Walz, it's Trump's pick for National Security Advisor, another highly questionable pick. He's made it very clear that he wants everybody's resignation at 12:01.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have been asking people directly who they gave money to, right? Which is clearly an
Forgot about
exercise
that.
of your
Right,
First
right,
Amendment
right.
rights,
Yeah.
who they voted for, which you can't ask that either. They're asking even the contractors that that's going to be the bar for people who actually are employees and not vendors with the NSC. And you're absolutely right, Jim. The career people are the backbone, whether they're in the DOJ or the NSC or any FBI, any of the other agencies. These are the people who serve under whoever the president is, and they do it, to your point, to serve their country. When this is more than a 4-alarm fire. I mean, I understand that people are sort of just taking all of this stuff in stride and hearing this and thinking we're going to get over it. You don't get over subordinating an entire country to the will of a handful of people. It's not a democracy. It is anathema to a democracy. And the fact that there aren't people running into courthouses to stop this vetting from happening, or that there's not some sort of injunction. Of course, it would be the Department of Justice that would do that. So yeah, it's unlikely that will happen. This is absolutely outrageous.
Speaking of Department of Justice, the other night, Jack Smith's report came out at 1 or 2 a.m. And Marjorie and I talked to each other on the phone very early. And I said, my goal was to read all 137 pages. I just don't have time. Well, I'll read a summary. She said the same thing. And I then said to her, we know one person who will have read all 137 pages. And who do you think we named, Andrea Cabral?
I have no idea.
That would be you, as a matter of fact. Do we learn anything? I mean, the conventional wisdom is the remember, for those who have forgotten, Aileen Cannon, of all people, the judge who's totally in the tank to Trump historically, ruled that it was okay not to release the report on the pending thing, classified documents case, but on the January 6th thing, over which she had no jurisdiction, it was fine, so it was released at, again, 1 or 2 a.m. The conventional wisdom is there's not much new there other than talking about how difficult the job was to interview 250 people because of the interference of the Trump people and the threats from some of Trump's supporters. What was your takeaway? Were there new takeaways, and what was your takeaway from the volume?
Well, I don't know that there were any real new takeaways in terms of what was divulged about his behavior. I think that there, at least for me, there were some takeaways around some decisions he made about the report. Let me preface everything by saying the job that Jack Smith did here was extraordinary and unprecedented. He is clearly an absolutely, superior prosecutor. He had clearly had every intention of seeing this through to the end and was stymied by a Justice Department memo that now apparently has been enshrined in stone as policy. That said,
around going after a sitting president is what you're talking about, right? Which is not the law. It is a policy within the executive branch. But go ahead.
And a policy
or judicial
from a memo.
Yeah.
Not like, sort of the
Office of Legal
policy.
Counsel. Isn't that where it's from? The Office of Legal Counsel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's what we think kind of thing versus this is, I will say this. There were some things in it that troubled me. One of them was he included a letter that he wrote to Merrick Garland in the preface of the report, right? And he mentions in the letter that he, in circumstances where it was not required, he certainly didn't have to do it. He allowed Trump's lawyers to see a draft of the report before it was finalized. Well, why would you do that? All the stuff with Aileen Cannon, they simply took the draft and went to Aileen Cannon and said, "Stop this."
Yeah.
If they didn't have any, he termed it an accommodation. Why would you? When has the Justice Department accommodated a criminal defendant like that? The president, no less, who you're investigating for essentially inciting an insurrection. I don't know why that happened, but all of this stuff with Aileen Cannon that came about that stymied him from releasing the second volume of the report, that's where that came from. Had they not shown it, they could have simply made their own decision internally within the Justice Department to release it. So the willingness to accommodate troubled me. The report is difficult to read because people are referred to by number: co-conspirator number 1, co-conspirator 2, witness 5, whatever, 250. You have to do a lot to keep track of who he's talking about. He presents it in a pretty linear fashion, but it's very difficult to keep track of. And we know that people in this country don't really have kind of attention span that causes them to flip back and forth from page to page to kind of, I don't know how many people are going to read this anyway. That said, it is still an extraordinary document because he makes it very clear that he believes very strongly he would have convicted Trump. Of course he would have convicted Trump. Had it not been so apparent to the SCOTUS, they would not have given Trump this incredibly, ridiculously broad immunity. It would not have given him immunity at all. It was clear to everybody that he would have been convicted.
Two more quick things. I just want to note there's a new poll, an AP NORC poll, that says only 2 in 10 U.S. adults are extremely or very confident the Department of Justice will be fair and nonpartisan during Trump's second term, which is a shockingly low number to me, by the way, because I assume to be 100% Republicans saying that I support it. But a second question, I assume that she was asked some questions about going after political enemies as Trump has promised repeatedly. And it would seem to me that the top of that list, being a semi-student of Trump, are Liz Cheney and Jack Smith. Can you conjure up, if you were in moot court, at least a colorable criminal claim that Pam Bondi or Kash Patel as head of the FBI could come up with, at least to bring charges against either? You're shaking your head. No, nothing.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That does not mean that he won't try, because it doesn't matter what the truth is. It matters how much you can embed a particular narrative, how much you can taint someone. It happened with Hillary Clinton. He tried to get President Zelensky of Ukraine to do it with Joe Biden. It doesn't matter whether or not it's factually based. And that's where people should be incredibly alarmed and worried. And, like I said, a 4-alarm fire for what's about to happen within the cabinet of the United States of America, and in particular within the Justice Department and the security agencies.
Can we come back to Massachusetts and talk about this hearing yesterday? Behind closed doors, as almost everything is in Massachusetts. This Michael Proctor.
Well, this is at least legit behind closed doors. Personnel matters, you could say, would be legit behind closed doors.
Well, I think there's a public interest thing here. But in any case, behind closed doors, Michael Proctor was the lead state cop in the Karen Reed situation. He's the one who was forced to read his own misogynistic, nauseating texts. And he's been suspended. He also was the lead investigator in the Brian Walsh case, where the guy is accused of killing his wife. And we don't know the outcome. The hearing continues on Monday. My question isn't about the hearing as such. When a cop like this has been shown to be behaved, I'll be euphemistic, inappropriately, to say the least, in at least one case, does the prosecutorial side of government do a broad like was done with Andy Ducon with the drug lab thing, when they found out about it and they looked at they basically said, let's kick all the cases out. They looked at everything he touches, because I would argue, and I think this is a fair position, if his behavior was like that in the Karen Reed case, why should we assume his behavior was not comparable or equally troubling in a whole host of cases? What happens on the prosecutor's side of cases that Proctor was involved in?
Well,
what should happen?
To some degree, it depends on the prosecutor's office. I don't know of any prosecutor's office that would sort of just wholesale look at every single case he's ever done. Certainly, if you have a reasonable suspicion, something is brought to your attention, or the defense bar makes a motion for a particular information, records or something like that, they would. Certainly, I mean, there's a wide range of authority. If you're a district attorney, you absolutely could undertake that kind of look at everything. The issue isn't necessarily in every case. In this case, he was talking about Karen Reed in a derogatory fashion, in circumstances that indicated that she was immediately suspected of this. I mean, there was clearly some evidence to support that. But that, he was sort of prejudiced from the beginning. You can say something inappropriate in a text.
No, you're totally right. That's even more important in many ways. You're right. I'm sorry. The prejudice.
The test is still going to be whether or not that had something to do with the way you proceeded with the case or caused you to do something inappropriate.
So let me say, if I'm a defense attorney in a case, not Karen Reed, not Brian Walsh, where Proctor was involved, if I file a motion to discover whatever it is about what Proctor did in this case, based on this, would that almost automatically be granted by a judge without the defense having to do a ton of work to support their request?
I wouldn't think that it would automatically be granted, because in the same way that you can't necessarily hold a defendant responsible for a crime they commit subsequent to having been convicted of a crime previously, you do have to look at this on a case-by-case basis. It depends on what the basis of the motion is. It would certainly cause the prosecutor to do some investigation of it, but you can't sort of say automatically that because he is the officer on the case, that triggers a dismissal. You would have to show something. You would have to show something.
No, I didn't mean a dismissal. It would trigger at least disclosure of whatever it is that's reasonable that the defense is looking for.
I think that's.
Oh, I didn't mean a dismissal.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you meant you would a case automatically be dismissed. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay, Andrea Cabral, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay.
How soon after the thing came out at 2 a.m. did you read all 137 pages? That's what I want to know.
Well, some when it came out, and then a little bit more this morning.
Yes, exactly.
I was a little tired.
Yeah, you might be at 2 o'clock in the morning. Andrea, thank you.
Andrea, it's great to see you. Be well. Thanks.
We've been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us every week. After a quick break, environmentalist Bill McKibben joins us. We're going to talk to him about the California wildfires and a little bit about Jimmy Carter as one of the first presidents to really push environmental issues. In the modern age, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrea Cabral, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay.
How soon after the thing came out at 2 a.m. did you read all 137 pages? That's what I want to know.
Well, some when it came out, and then a little bit more this morning.
Yes, exactly.
I was a little tired.
Yeah, you might be at 2 o'clock in the morning. Andrea, thank you.
Andrea, it's great to see you. Be well. Thanks.
We've been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us every week. After a quick break, environmentalist Bill McKibben joins us. We're going to talk to him about the California wildfires and a little bit about Jimmy Carter as one of the first presidents to really push environmental issues. In the modern age, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
From the highlights of 2024.
Passing the Affordable Homes Act, a $5 billion law that I proposed and signed that's going to create more housing.
To what's on the agenda for 2025.
We've got to do better in terms of transportation.
Governor Healy lays out the state of the Commonwealth.
The true strength of this great state is our people.
Listen live tonight starting at 7 on GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer, the Unclaimed Property Division, is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News from Studio 3 out here in Brighton. We're back at the library tomorrow with Latasha Brown from Black Voters Matter, The auditor and former U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky is actually part of our Live Music Friday, and I'm not going to tell you why, Marjorie, or how.
It's okay.
We're joined on Zoom by environmentalist Bill McKibben. Bill is an educator, author, co-founder of 350.org, and the founder of ThirdAct.org. He has a newsletter on Substack titled The Crucial Years and writes regularly for The New Yorker. Bill, wonderful to see you. Welcome.
Well, it's good to see you. And I got to say, I once spent 3 weeks living in a room next to Robert Pinsky at a writer's retreat. And if he's bringing his trumpet, then everybody's in for a treat. He's the real deal. Give him my love.
Oh yeah,
we will do that.
What was the right? Was it the up in Vermont? The writers retreat?
It was up in Saratoga. It was up in. So it's actually my wife was teaching, and I was just hanging out and with Pinsky and wandering around. So.
Well, we'll pass along your hello, Bill. He's joining us tomorrow at the library.
So I thought of you a lot this week, Bill McKibben, and I'm so glad we have a chance to talk to you today. These horrible, horrible wildfires out in California. What distressed me, well, everything distressed me, but one thing in particular, I watched an entire 60 Minutes piece on this, and it was a really good piece. And their audience is older, too, so it could have had a huge impact, and their audience is large. They never mentioned climate change. When they were talking about what happened in California. You're seeing it or hearing it mentioned more now, but we blamed everything but climate change. You know, the number of trucks, amount of water, the mayor, the governor, everything but climate change. So what was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I mean, just what a almost unbearable set of scenes we've been watching. And all the more powerful, of course, because they're against a backdrop that all of us have spent our entire lives watching in every movie and TV show and, you know, dumb cop drama and everything that we've ever watched. It's been against these exact backdrops. Particularly searing in some way for me, not compared to the people who were there, but though I've spent almost all my whole adult life in the East, I was a boy in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
In
Father was working for the Journal, and the house where my first memories are of burned down on Friday in Altadena. And you know, that's not. I mean, that's important for the people who live there now, not for me. But I've actually been struck by how much I've been thinking about it. Altadena then and now is a beautiful spot up against the mountains, and significant to the world because Mount Wilson, which towers above it, and where I took my first hike at age 5 in a lifetime of taking hikes, at the top is the observatory where Edwin Hubble basically figured out that we lived in an expanding universe, you know, laid the groundwork for the Big Bang. And that observatory came within feet of being burned down. Apparently, they've managed, at least for now, to protect it. But it's a reminder of how both intensely personal and how remarkably global events like this are. This is the most. My guess is this will be the most remembered urban fires since Pompeii. You know. And in Pompeii, you know, people didn't have smartphones, so it may outdo that. We'll see.
Yeah, but back to Marjorie's point, you know, she mentioned 60 Minutes. Even the reports that did mention it usually were in the second to last paragraph. And I assume it's no great revelation to suggest when there's a horror that virtually everybody on the planet agrees there's a horror, making the connection between it and something that we need addressing is to me a huge educational opportunity. I understand the meteorologists used to be very resistant. They're sort of coming around. Why is the straight news media, mainstream news, not Newsmax, so hesitant to call it what it is?
I'm not even sure people are hesitant. I think for some of these people, it's so obvious that this is it. This is what's happening, that it's just sort of a feature of the world we live in. But yes, every story should make the point that this happened after a year of no rain, almost literally no rain, like 1/10 of an inch since last May. It happened after the hottest or second hottest summer in the history of Los Angeles. There was no doubt that this at a certain point this fall that this was going to happen. When it gets that hot and that dry, all it takes is a spark. And in a city of, 10 million people, eventually there's going to be a spark. I mean, somebody hits a rock with their lawnmower and there you go. You're off to the races. And so, yes, we should always be talking about it. I think I may worry a tiny bit less about that than some others, because I think that most people at some visceral level understand what's going on.
Okay, but we have a new administration coming in, and as we know, Donald Trump
They
is
don't understand.
is a climate change denier. The guy that's going to head the EPA, we'll talk about him in a minute. He's not a fan of climate interventions, and there's this notion that went on with these fires. Like I said, that if we only had more water in the hydrants,
Yep.
if there were more fire trucks and more firefighters, yeah,
Right.
would that have made a difference around the edges? No doubt, but it wouldn't. But this is
I mean,
Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. The wind was blowing 100 miles an hour. It was a firestorm. I mean, no one was going to stand there with a hose and prevent it. This is just the world that we live in now. And you're very right, though, to point out that what worries me less is less the lack of information than the barrage of disinformation
Right.
that allows allows people who just don't know anything or aren't thinking or don't want to think to believe that, to me, the very height of it was our world's richest man explaining that it was because there was a woman fire chief.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff is hideous, and it's obviously going to be very bad for the next 4 years.
Speaking of that guy, how much did you love the cover of the New Yorker, one of your publications? If people didn't see this, we talked about it the other day. Elon Musk, full face. The drawing is with his big hand on the Bible, and then you get like a quarter of somebody else's face who's doing a side eye at Musk with a little tiny hand on the Bible, and that was the guy who is actually going to be the next president of the United States, Elon Musk. I'm not generally a very hopeful guy, and this is an area where I'm generally even less hopeful than my usual self. But I was thinking about the insurance companies the other day and the back-breaking, budget-breaking cost of this thing. Is it possible that may be what breaks the logjam in this whole debate that you've been leading for decades, Bill McKibben?
I think I think it's definitely going to play a big part. There have been two events this year. The first was Hurricane Helene in the Appalachians, and that was fires in Los Angeles that just are so off the charts and so beyond what our systems were designed to cope with that there's going to be some serious breakage. California has tried to backstop their insurance system with, a kind of state-run pool but we're talking, I mean, the average value of homes in Pacific Palisades was well over $3 million.
Yeah.
This is, among other things, one of the first times we've had really rich climate refugees. We're not talking about the lower Ninth Ward when we talk about Pacific Palisades. And so I don't know exactly how the political pressures will manifest themselves, but the economic pressures are extremely real. I mean, we spent much of the last year talking about the price of eggs, but the price of insurance is a much bigger part of most people's budgets, and it's increasingly just impossible. The actuarial table was one of the greatest human inventions there ever was. It's really one of and if you listed 5 crucial human technologies, that would be one, because it allowed us to hedge risk. And the ability to hedge risk, I mean, everything that we do, buy a house, start a business, build a city hall, whatever it is, all requires being able to hedge risk or no one will do anything. And the only problem with this incredibly powerful technology is that it depends on the world behaving in the future as it did in the past. And when that's no longer a good bet, then we have all kinds of trouble. One of the things I'm saying is, if you thought inflation was a problem before, I mean, you've seen what it's done to municipal budgets, for instance, to deal with health insurance over the last 10 or 15 years. So now brace yourself for what it means when you have to insure everything.
Well, there's a stat from this Yale climate study that talks about how U.S. home insurance rates have gone up 34% from 2018 to 2023, over 11% in 2023 alone. And they say that that is in large part due to climate change. And that's the other thing I wondered about. You know, we're all talking about rebuild. We're not me, but people out, politicians at home are talking about rebuilding in California, in those neighborhoods that had the fire. I mean, we talked with Chuck Todd earlier, politically speaking, that Donald Trump with the Olympics coming there will probably want to have a nice LA for the Olympics, which are going to be there in 2028. But is rebuilding what we should be doing? Because the vulnerabilities there continue.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a wonderful writer named Mike Davis, West Coast LA writer, who wrote a series of books 20 years ago, 30 years ago, talking about the fire regime in up on Malibu and Pacific Palisades. And, you know, it might be a good idea to just let some of that beautiful country be beautiful country where people can go and look at the ocean instead of trying to figure out how you defend it in an ever hotter world. I don't know. But I do think that one of the economic offshoots of all of this is that increasingly people are going to start demanding that the institutions that caused it, big oil, pay some of the price. One of the more hopeful things that's happened in the since we last talked was that the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, signed a bill that we're calling the Climate Superfund Bill, or the Polluter Pays Bill, that basically is going to send a bill off to Exxon and Chevron and people every year for the price of rebuilding roads and bridges in the Empire State that have been wiped out by climate disasters. And I tell you this in part because the same bill will be up on Beacon Hill in the year to come. We've already adopted it here in Vermont. We were the first, but something tells me Exxon was not too terrified of the 3-person Vermont legal department.
We're talking to
Letitia James in Albany has a few more lawyers at her.
Yeah.
And in Boston too, it would be a big help to get that through in Massachusetts.
We will actually, next time the governor's on in February, we will talk to her about it.
You know, one quick aside, I mentioned this the other day because it was so fascinating to me. There was a story about the Getty Museum that's, of course, out near where the fires are, and that they were really planning ahead to save the artwork there. But the millions and millions and millions of dollars it costs for a special kind of rocky, stony roof and all these fancy air systems. And you think to yourself, obviously, that's something that, unless you are really a mogul in the film industry or a superstar, you can't afford that kind of thing. So you said to yourself, that I guess that shows what kind of effort you have to make to prevent fires at homes in that area.
Hey, Marjorie, even our richest California moguls are all trying to get into space so they can.
That's right.
It's fine with us.
Jeff Bezos this morning off to.
We're talking to Bill McKibben, thirdact.org. Bill, let's do a little history, which parts of it at least are uplifting. When we're talking about you, we often introduce you by saying the guy who started it all with The End of Nature, your book in 1989. But actually, let's go 10 years earlier than when you wrote your book. Here's a little song that you recommended to your readers just the other day. Here it is.
Give me the warm power of the sun. Give me the steady flow of the waterfall. Give me the spirit of
That's John Hall. I think that's John Hall, who was in Orleans, who then became a member of Congress. Am I right about that? I think I am, aren't I?
I think that's right, and I think that's Carly
Simon. That's right. And they're singing outside the Capitol in '79. This was in a Bill McKibben piece at a No Nukes protest. You wrote a really interesting piece doing a comparison between Jimmy Carter. First, remind people what he did on this solar front, to Reagan, and then Biden to Trump. Start with the solar panels, if you don't mind, Bill.
Absolutely. So this is truly interesting. we're in the same position now in certain ways that we were 45 years ago at the Carter-Reagan transition. Carter had done a lot of work to try and get us on a new energy footing. And he did put solar panels on the roof of the White House, but that was the least of it. He had put money in the budget for his next, had he been reelected, that was designed to make sure that America was doing enough solar research that 25% of our electricity would be coming from the sun by the year 2000. And there's no real technical reason that that couldn't have happened. Every time we pour money on this problem, we get much better at doing it. But of course, we didn't do it then, just the opposite. We elected Reagan, and he took the panels off the roof, but he shut down the solar industry. There were 30,000 people at work in the solar industry in America in 1980, and 28,000 of them had lost their jobs within So, and one really should, I know that he's now in the ground, but one more time to just pay a little homage to the man from Plains. He had remarkable foresight. This was a guy, remember, who'd been a nuclear engineer in the Navy, but he understood that the sun was going to be the central focus if we were going to affordably deal with the crisis we were in. Fast forward to now, Biden, also a one-term Democratic president, also much maligned by all the, smarty pants out there for a number of things, but also has done yeoman work in trying to get us on the right path in energy. Somehow, with 50 senators, he managed to cobble together this Inflation Reduction Act. Because of Joe Manchin, it's far from perfect. It's filled with a lot of dumb things too, but that was the price. And what it's done is get us back on the path that Carter envisioned. The successes so far have been pretty remarkable. We now have the Western Hemisphere's largest solar panel plant in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district in Georgia.
I love that.
Brilliant, by the way.
But just as we had in that transition in 1980, now we have the threat of closing it all down. It's very clear that Project 2025 and all the ideologues around Trump and all the fossil fuel guys want to close it down entirely. I think the question will be whether they managed in the last 2 years to spread enough money in enough red districts to give a few senators and Congress people a little pause. But it's also up now to the rest of us to figure out how to keep that dream going. Carter was working off the energy liberated by Earth Day in 1970. All through that decade, the decade of limits to growth and of small is beautiful and all the things that built on that extraordinary explosion of energy, of political energy. We're going to have to try and do the same thing. And I've hinted at this with you guys before, and we're really about to finally announce it, but people should put aside a day on their calendar at the equinox in September, that weekend, the 20th, 21st. We're going to do a big global day of action we're going to call Sun Day. And the entire point is going to be to try and drive home the extraordinary opportunity we now have. I've said this to you before. Even those of us who care about this stuff still tend to think of power from the sun and wind as alternative energy, as the kind of whole foods of energy. But it isn't. It is, as I've said before, the Costco of energy. It's the cheap stuff. It's available in bulk. It's on the shelf. And if we realize that, then we might put enough pressure on people to really start, politicians to really start making change. And I think that, Boston and Massachusetts will be key parts there because we've got leaders, Michelle Wu, Governor Healy, others who really are committed to action on climate change. But it's hard, even with the money from the IRA, to make the progress that we need. And they need that kind of symbolic lift, that kind of push that only comes when you get 50,000 people out on Boston Common, and a solar panel hanging off the golden dome of the State House with a big green light up above it, flashing off the power of the sun. On and on and on. In my best world, of course, that's the night when we convince Theo Epstein that all the lights at Fenway should be running off solar power for the day.
That's right.
Just at the point across. So I think that I think we're entering a period when resistance straight up is going to be very hard. At least in Washington, the fossil fuel industry holds most of the cards, and they're going to play them better than they did in the first Trump administration. That means that we need some other ways in. And the place where these guys are vulnerable, above all else, the place where they're vulnerable, is in the fact that we can produce the same product they produce, energy, cleaner, cheaper, and better. And if we do it fast, then we have a chance, not to stop global warming. Too late for that. Los Angeles is, it's hard to tell what's going to happen in the future. But we can still stop it short of the place where it takes down our civilizations if we move with some dispatch.
We only have 30 seconds. The fact that you're not wearing a Red Sox hat should not suggest that you're not optimistic about the upcoming season, correct?
We seem to have a rotation, and we shall see. But I really do want those big bank of lights running off solar energy above the monster.
That would be great.
And we get to September.
Bill McKibben, if people want to find out more about this event and what else they can do to make them feel less horrible about climate going forward in this next administration, is 350.org and thirdact.org.
Third Act. And, I do this
Substack.
Free newsletter for some reason.
Yep, the newsletter too. Yep, that's right.
So if you type into the crucial years and my name into whatever thing you have, it should somehow pop up and for free deliver even more wisdom than I've dispensed to you today.
Beautifully put, my friend. Bill McKibben, it's great to see you as always. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, all guys.
Thanks.
Take care.
Be well.
Thank
Be
you
well.
so much, Bill McKibben, who, of course, is the great environmentalist, author, educator, co-founder of 350.org, founder of thirdact.org, which is a way to donate when you are in the third act of life. I think you're over 60
Older
or
Americans,
something like that.
that's right.
The crucial years he just mentioned for the newsletter, and that's on Substack. And again, it's called The Crucial Years. He also writes great pieces for The New Yorker. He's everywhere. After a quick break, our new and improved Two More Things segment, a new study out of Harvard and MIT further proves the dangers of eating too many hot dogs, Jim. Not to mention too much salami and bacon.
What a Harvard and MIT know, I mean, really.
Jim wants to talk about Congresswoman Nancy Mace offering to take this outside as a physical spat with one of her colleagues down in Congress. Two more things in 2 minutes. Let's see if we can do it. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Four years ago, President Biden made closing Guantanamo Bay's prison in Cuba a goal, but now that looks unlikely to happen, disappointing those who consider Gitmo a national embarrassment.
Man, I mean, especially now that President Biden's a lame duck. I don't understand the politics of this at all.
The political and legal barriers to closing Guantanamo Bay on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Boston Medical Center, committed to delivering medical excellence that empowers all patients. Learn more about how BMC's team of experts is rewriting healthcare for cancer, sickle cell, and beyond at bmc.org. And MIT Sloan Executive Education. You can advance your career with 2 to 3 day courses designed for professionals. Topics include leadership, innovation, and strategic management. Learn more at executive.mit.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow. Diana DeZoglio is among the people who joins us. Time for two more things. The segment right before Henry's 1 o'clock news, where we share a thing or two from our lives or news that didn't fit in the rest of the show. And before Marjorie does her thing, tons, and I do mean tons of you sent texts in response to my painful story about my difficulty cracking the shells on hard-boiled eggs. There were so many that we're going to do a whole segment on
That's
it
right.
tomorrow. So keep texting. We haven't ignored you.
Big issues.
We'll get to it, we promise, tomorrow. Hard-boiled eggs, cracking, and you. Marjorie, what's your thing?
Well, we have learned that regularly eating red meat, we knew this already, I think,
Okay.
would be linked with heart disease, diabetes, and several types of cancer.
Okay.
Now we've learned that some particularly popular types of red meat could be bad for developing dementia,
Like
Jim.
what?
And those three things, hot dogs, sausage, and bacon.
Excuse me. Hot dogs, the exact things that you send me subscriptions to for my birthday and Christmas, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's not correct. I don't send you a hot dog subscription.
Send me
I'm higher
salami,
end than
so
that.
what's-
Sausage of the month, bacon of the month,
And
or
salami
salami of the month.
Thank you.
So I hate to tell you, you could be well along getting into
Well-
those dementia years.
By the way, I mean, we really should be all cutting back on that kind of. Where's that out of? Where's it?
This is out. Well, this is Kay Lazar at the Boston Globe.
No. I mean, who's the source of the research?
I didn't get that far in the story.
Okay,
Jim.
fine.
Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health and the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard.
They can probably be trusted.
Yep.
So can I tell you what my thing is? It was inspired by Sue O'Connell. You remember when Sue O'Connell was talking about Mark Zuckerberg yesterday?
Yes.
Saying, I'm from Revere. We were talking about recent alpha male identity. Listen to what Sue had to say, particularly the last line.
Mark Zuckerberg going on Joe Rogan and complaining about how he got a mother, he has all sisters, he's married to a woman, he's got daughters, and he just needs to get some male energy going in Facebook at Meta because he's just overwhelmed by this femininity, all the while looking like the kind of guy that I could beat up in a hallway, okay?
That was one of my favorite lines today. And the reason I bring that up is not just to celebrate Sue beating him up in the hallway, but it apparently has trickled up to Congress. This Congresswoman, Democrat, Jasmine Crockett, was talking about reinstating a subcommittee on civil rights yesterday. She's a Democrat. And Representative Nancy Mace was the Republican opposing it. And listen to this back and forth. First Crockett and then Mace.
Everybody's campaign coffers really are struggling right now. So she gonna keep saying trans, so that people will feel threatened. And child, listen, I want y'all
I
to
am
tell
no
me
child.
whether or
Do
not
not call me a child. I am no child.
I want
Don't
to
even
find
start.
out
I am a grown
which
woman.
of those
I am 47 years
emails
old. I have broken
actually
more
have.
glass ceilings than you
Chairman,
ever
I
will.
am reclaiming my time.
You will not do that. I
Order.
am not a child.
I am reclaiming my time.
If you want to take it outside,
Mr. Chairman, the committee is
Oh, can we hear?
not-
Do you want to take it outside one more time? Can we just hear that, please?
I am reclaiming my time.
If you want to take it outside,
Mr. Chairman. And I would say maybe inspired by Sue. So it got me to thinking. We only have a couple of seconds left. Who would you like to see take it outside with, I don't know, J.D. Vance? I was thinking Nancy Pelosi. Do you think Nancy Pelosi could take him outside and really do him a dirty?
You know, this is not new, though. Remember that guy, Mark Wayne Mullins?
Oh, the guy
senator
from Oklahoma.
Yeah, who wanted to get into a fisticuffs with the head of the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien.
Oh, you threatened to punch
They
him
were-
out at a
they were-
hearing.
Yeah, they were about to beat each other up. So things are getting physical down there.
Rather,
at the
I guess our
Capitol,
point is, rather than this tiresome debating thing, which we do in government, how about taking him outside?
Go
Is the
mano
way
a
to
mano,
do-
womano,
Or
womano,
womano,
out in
womano,
the porch,
exactly.
maybe the front porch or the front
I am not a
steps or
child.
whatever.
Do you want to take it outside? She says. Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina. That's it.
Okay, that is it. Up next after the new news are
And your credit or debit card has expired, it's time to update your information. Take just a few minutes to make sure your information is current. Go to gbh.org/update. And thank you for your support.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Lawrence General Hospital, now united with Holy Family Hospital to help build a robust regional healthcare system defined by a shared commitment to patient-centered care and medical excellence. More at lawrencegeneral.org. And the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you.
What about that open, handicap accessible bathroom stall? Who among us hasn't snuck in there when the lines are long? Or are you a jerk for doing so? Or are there circumstances when it's okay? That's all next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. TikTok is on the cusp of getting banned in the U.S., affecting tens of millions of users in this country alone. NPR's Bobby Allen reports on where the legal and political battle stands surrounding the Chinese-owned video sharing app, including the possibility of the Supreme Court stepping in.
Many of the 170 million Americans on TikTok are confused about what happens next, and it's hard to blame them. The Supreme Court is set to rule soon on whether the divest or ban law stands. The justices appear likely to uphold the law, but will the court delay the start date? That remains to be seen. Also uncertain is whether TikTok will go dark on Sunday. There are mixed reports about that. And now the Washington Post is reporting that Trump is considering an executive order to save the Chinese-owned app, but it's not clear how, because that order would not override an act of Congress. In short, TikTok's future is up in the air, and the service being shut down is on the table. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
The U.S. Senate's holding more confirmation hearings today for cabinet nominees ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration Monday. One is Lee Zeldin, tapped to oversee the Environmental Protection Agency.
The American people need leaders who can find common ground to solve the urgent issues.
Busy day for space billionaires. NPR's Jeff Brumfield tells us 2 rockets are being launched by 2 of the world's richest men.
The first launch was of a rocket built by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. It took off from Florida in the early hours of the morning.
Liftoff.
Later today, Elon Musk's company SpaceX is scheduled to launch another massive rocket from Texas. Carissa Christensen is CEO of the space analysis firm Bricetech. She says these billionaires see these huge rockets as part of their legacy.
Jeff Bezos talks about colonies orbiting the Earth, and Elon Musk, of course, talks about Mars as a destination.
Both rockets may also be used by NASA, which may soon be run by another billionaire. President Trump has nominated entrepreneur Jared Isaacman to lead the agency. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 16 points at 43,200.
Hold an auction to sell by February 14th as a way to access cash that is being held as collateral. Company owes lenders a lot more than $450 million. The company filed for bankruptcy for the first time last March, emerged 6 weeks later, and its debt was cut in half. And Joanne is not alone. At the end of last month, the Container Store filed for Chapter 11. Big Lots filed for Chapter 11 in September, and Party City closed all of its stores at the end of 2024. As incoming President Donald Trump pledges to conduct the largest mass deportation in U.S. history, Republican lawmakers in Massachusetts have refiled a bill that would authorize state and local judges to honor detention requests from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, for up to 12 hours if the individual has been convicted of serious crimes. The bill was refiled by Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr of Gloucester. In sports, the Celtics off until tomorrow, the Bruins off until Saturday. Forecast increasing clouds, low 30s today, clouds, low 20s overnight, all the way up to 29 degrees right now in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News from our studio in
The case that higher ed institutions like Harvard consistently and systematically ignore the needs of black and brown students. It's the focus of his latest terrific book, Class Dismissed: When Colleges Ignore Inequality and Students Pay the Price. Here now via Zoom is Anthony Jack. He's the inaugural faculty director of the Newberry Center on First-Generation Students, which I think he was one of too, an associate professor of higher education leadership at BU Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. Tony, it's great to meet you, and congratulations on the book. Thanks for being here.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great job. The detail with which you get from these students that you interview was really, really impressive, and it's quite moving. So tell people what you were trying to do here, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, as you mentioned, I am a first-generation college student. You know, my mom was a security guard. My brother was a janitor. I still remember my first plane ride ever in my life was actually to Amherst College. And so this work is at once, you know, my prize. What I wanted us to do is realize that all those statements that university presidents were making during the COVID-19 closures about how they were discovering how many of their students didn't have internet, how many of their students were low income, how insecure financially, structurally their students were. I was like, but you knew this long before that. You have not done the necessary work to actually prepare for the people who you are inviting to campus. And so what I wanted to do was to show how COVID closures exacerbated the inequalities that were already on campus and show how things got worse. And in using students' experiences to I hope, light a path towards a better and more equitable approach to admissions and retention.
You know, you researched and wrote this book, obviously, when at a lot of elite universities, the enrollment of kids of color was on the rise. Obviously, that's not the case after the Supreme Court decision. We'll get to whether or not the same conclusions you drew apply in this new environment. But you looked at a bunch of metrics, including one, Margie and I were talking this morning, that I never, ever would have thought about. Jobs.
Campus jobs. Yeah.
For kids.
Yes.
Could you flesh that out a little bit, Tony, if you would?
Yeah, no problem. And it's important to put it in larger context, right? MIT just increased their no loan financial aid policy to a family household income of $200,000, right? If a family makes less than that, their child will go loan free to MIT. Smith College became the most recent college in the country to go no loan, right? So there's a number of schools that are actually looking to increase the number of lower income and first generation college students in the hopes that go by yourself, go find what you have to do. The only problem is the most lucrative job, not just for pay, but also that cultural capital, right? That way of getting letters of recommendation, introduction to headhunters, being under professors' good graces, like being a research assistant, a course assistant, being in someone's lab. Those jobs are not posted more often than not. Those jobs are handed out in office hours. Those jobs are handed out at dinner, at lunch, over coffee. But who's more comfortable going to a professor's office hours? Who's more comfortable inviting a faculty member to dinner, right? And so class plays a very big role in who gets those, what they call high impact positions, right? Those positions that give you insights to the future, right? If you're interested in being, an engineer, working in someone's lab is a very important stepping stone to getting in. Well, to me, there's actually a model down the street from us, right? Northeastern has a system where everything that has to do with work, whether it's their externship, their fellowships office, all that stuff, is kind of housed into one unit where students are able to build rapport with faculty and staff over time and help them do it. Now, that's one way of doing it, like setting up a system where over time people can gain trust in the system that they're in to help students match it. But I think we need to make sure that faculty aren't handing out jobs in that way either. The University of Nebraska actually changed their policy that now any job that is officially funded through the school has to be posted on a centralized website. That's a huge first step into universalizing at least that initial access to jobs. Because if a job isn't posted, think about this. My mom is a security guard, my brother's a janitor, as I mentioned. They got their job by applying to what was open. They instilled in me that the way in which you get a job and you keep your job is to go through the traditional public channels. Yet the most prestigious, the most high capital positions on college campuses, and we know in the real world, is not what's posted, right? They always say most of the biggest deals in America and the world are handled not in boardrooms, but on the back nine on a golf course, right? When you think about the way in which that these are the building blocks to that moment, right? Think about how many times that chance encounter, we've heard stories of riding in the elevator with a CEO or having lunch next to this person at the table. That doesn't start once you leave. That's very much on campus too.
We're talking to Anthony Abraham. Jack, the book is Class Dismissed When Colleges Ignore Inequality. So tell us a couple of stories. One that struck me was a kid named Kevin, or a young man, I should say, named Kevin, who went to Harvard, came from a family with no money and wound up at one point dating a young woman who had a movie theater in her house. So, a little clash of cultures there. But tell us about his experience with jobs and at Harvard.
Yeah, and so Kevin was a great person to talk to, a young white man from the South, and he told me that for him, doing work is about making money because he came into Harvard with being a seasonal roofer in Georgia's hot sun, right? So he was used to using his hands and his body in a very physical way. And what was interesting was when he started dating this young woman, he realized that she had a very different approach to jobs than he did. She was a research assistant and she worked through Radcliffe. So she was connecting with faculty members. She was doing research year after year, and he was doing dorm crew, which is a janitorial service where students clean the rooms of their peers. And even though he had started to rub elbows with the top 1%, even lovingly holding hands with one of them, he couldn't shake off his working class roots in the sense of he was like, I believe you should do work for money. And he said something I'll never forget. He says, I never knew that you could advance your career and make money at the same time.
Yeah.
And then he went even further with that. He said the people who do work on this campus are not the people who do research. He very much separated the people who do manual labor, specifically talking about the dining hall workers, and those who do research. And he felt a greater affinity to those who actually what he saw as doing work. And then he went further. He says, I did not know you can go career shopping. You can when you need to make money. And yet a lot of people, a lot of students, and not just at Harvard, this is an issue across the board because universities are more likely to use online platforms for jobs like Handshake or just use those once a semester job fairs. And so if you don't know that RA positions are always on a rolling basis, that walking up to a faculty member and say, hey, I read your paper and I took your class, are you hiring in your lab or are you hiring research assistants? That's a very common thing on a college campus, whether, people do it at BU, at Harvard, at Amherst, a lot of people hire. And it's especially salient in the STEM fields because one faculty member in the sciences can hire as many as an entire department. Because if the lab is 30 people, and 10 of those people are like postdocs and graduate students and they have other undergrads, a science professor can actually hire a lot of people. So that's when you talk about the gateway to get these positions and the kind of inequality that it begins, I think it's imperative for universities to interrogate who is getting what jobs and what are the resources, both, money, but also the letters of recommendation, the introductions, and all those things that you kind of really come to college for.
Anthony Jack, an earlier version in a different setting of what you wrote, I experienced. A good friend of mine was president of the Boston Teachers Union many years ago, since died, Kathy Kelly. She was a kindergarten teacher. And one day I went to see her testify for funding before the Education Committee. And her basic message was, don't give me increased funding for what happens within the four walls of the school if you ignore whether the kid, when he or she comes to school, is adequately nourished, if there's a safe route when he or she walks from their home, the whole deal.
Absolutely.
And so many people at the front of the room said, legislators said, I'm totally with you, Kathy. We just can't afford, we can't solve every kind of problem. So assuming that your thesis, which is a variation of that theme, that you essentially bring your family and your community and your background with you to the Harvards or the whatever, and you can't. You're not separate from, your environment, the environment from which you come. Are universities equipped, if they acknowledge everything you say, to address most of this, or is it pipe dream stuff?
They can be better equipped. They really can. One of the reasons why if anyone reads this work, I actually want to end the use of the bubble metaphor when it comes to college, because we have to fundamentally understand that students don't come to college, families come to college. And I do mean both our first gen and lower income students, but also our legacy students, because if your name is on a building, you have a very different experience, and your class background fundamentally shapes how you are experiencing that institution, in the same way how those who are on full financial aid. It's incredibly important for us to do that. Look, I mean, think about the Boston valedictorian study, which I think was
yes.
Marjorie obsesses on this,
I
but
thought
go
that
ahead,
was one of the
Tony.
saddest
it's a
things.
remarkable study, right? Because we invest a ton in education, and we invest in the state and in the city, and we want to pat ourselves on the back with that study. Like, look what our valedictorians are doing. And when one statistic was something like, 2 out of every 7 valedictorians experience homelessness after college.
Yeah.
That's not the right statistic. My question is, how many of them experience homelessness before going off to college, right? College was probably more of a protector and a buffer. Universities can take lessons from that study and the research I have in this book, because we need to prepare ourselves not just for who is coming to campus, but what is coming alongside them, right next to their extra long twin sheets, right? Because do we understand how to support a student from a rural part of America and a center city? Are our mental health services equipped to help a student through the transition from those particular environments? Do we actually know how to help students? I'll give you a quick example. A student told me that one of the most used apps on his phone, yes, it's Instagram, yes, it's TikTok, but it's also the Citizen app. Now, some people use the Citizen app to see what parts of the city to avoid. A water main break on Thurs Street. There's a stoplight out on Commonwealth Ave. He uses it to see how close danger is to him and his family.
Oh, wow.
Right? Do we understand how much that taxes a student? Do we know how to help a student who's coming from a reservation to one of our campuses, when there's a lot of history there of land theft and settler colonialism, and quite frankly, a earned distrust of higher education in these institutions? Do we know how to help a student make that transition, or do we want to just focus on study skills?
By the way, we're talking to Anthony Jack, a class dismissed the book. Over his left shoulder is his Amherst banner. Over his right shoulder is his book sitting on his right shoulder. I'm assuming that this is obvious, that while there's retrenchment in terms of, in great part because of what Supreme Court did in the UNC Harvard case on affirmative action, if anything, the conclusions you reach are even more important when the population is shrinking, at least currently.
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I will say this. Let me just add this. The
Please.
reason why I think it's even more important now is because with the decision of the Supreme Court in those cases, and the future cases that we know are going to be coming, universities are going to flock and try to recruit more and more lower income and first generation college students. And that's one of the main reasons why I focus in my work, because first gen is anybody who's the first in their family to go to college is first gen, right? So across all racial groups. And if you read the Supreme Court case now and before, and also President Biden's push, he was like, we should reward those strivers. We should reward those who are first in their families, who are making the most of themselves. So as universities flock to record more of them, my question is, are you extending invitations that you are ready to extend? Have you changed your financial aid policies, or Or have you also looked at your dining hall policies, your winter break policies, and all those other things that make it clear that there's a separate and unequal experience happening on your campus?
You know, Tony, you talked about having to, I think you got a job at the gym so you could have enough money to get something to eat when you were at Amherst during. I don't know if this is still true, but I remember visiting Amherst College one time. And Amherst College is one of the hardest colleges in America to get into, right? It's either Amherst or Williams, right at the top of the list, the best colleges. And going into some fraternity houses, you usually think fraternity houses, they're kind of these dumps with smells like beer and there's, sneakers everywhere. Well, at Amherst College, they seem to have an awful lot of chandeliers and oriental rugs, they were very beautiful. It kind of reeked of being a very wealthy, beautiful campus, but a very wealthy campus. So I'm wondering, for you, being from a family with security guard mom, first generation janitor, how did you fare there? Because it is extremely competitive and really smart students that are there. How was it?
Amherst was the best training ground I probably could have dreamt up. But I realized that my experience at Amherst was shaped by the previous year. I was a Head Start kid and went to public school my entire life, right? I'm a Head Start alum, a very proud one. But I had a football coach who liked athlete students but didn't like student athletes. And so I ended up switching to a private school for my senior year of high school.
Okay.
So I went to Gulliver Prep. And so I had a full 1-year tutorial about how the top 1% live.
Okay.
And that tempered my experience for Amherst. Luckily, when I got there, fraternities had already been abolished, but the old names and the old houses that were turned into dorms were still there.
Oh, no
and all
more
that kind of stuff like
chandeliers
that.
and oriental rugs.
Still,
They were
still
gone.
present and
Okay.
things like that. But the thing is, for me, in my work, what I try to show is students' trajectories to college fundamentally shape their experience in. And we have to understand that pre-college inequalities, whether it's in their high school, in their neighborhoods, and how it continues to be their experience. And there is something true. Universities cannot solve generations of redlining, blockbusting, and land theft. But they can better prepare their faculty, staff, and administrators to support students who come from places that have been ravaged by those processes.
Tony, Jack, I only have a couple of minutes. One last thing. And by the way, one of Tony's responsibilities is he runs the Newberry Center, focusing on first-generation students.
Yes.
I want to talk about your other hat, though, you're associate professor of higher education leadership. Everything you talked about in your book and with us requires leadership, needless to say. A regular on our show is Khalil Gibran Muhammad, who was at Harvard and just moved to Princeton. And he's still doing a little Harvard, but he's mostly at Princeton. We talked to him the other day. One of the things we talked to him about almost every time he's on, including 2 days ago, was the absence of leadership in at least one front from leaders of higher education. We single out the Michael Roths of the world, the guy from Wesleyan, who took on Harvard when Harvard said, well, we're going to be neutral on issues that are not central to what we're doing. And we always say, where are the other college presidents standing up to Trumpism, to, for the demise of diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera, et cetera? Do you see more leadership in higher education than we, and I don't want to speak for Khalil, but I think I can, than we all see? Do you see it?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure, because what I'm afraid of is what's happening almost like in the NFL and what we see more publicly is that when a university hits a rough patch, that president leaves and then they give their first shot to the first Black president or the first female president or something like that. And then they have to right a ship during the most turbulent times in the school history without the full support of the board or the community. And I think we need to actually we actually need more of that kind of stand-upness in higher education, because this whole kind of reneging almost on the core true nature of principal neutrality, which is where universities used to be, right? Like principal neutrality wasn't saying they weren't going to take with any stance. It was like they were going to take a principled one based upon its mission and its history and where it wants to go. Now, this kind of cowing to the whims of uninformed, uneducated, unruly people is backwards.
We hope you'll come back and talk about that and the first generation issue even more with us. We hope you will. It's great to meet you.
Yeah.
Your book's terrific, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
congratulations,
Great.
and thank you very much for joining us. We've been speaking with Anthony Jack, the inaugural faculty director of the Newbury Center and associate professor of higher education leadership at Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. The book we've been talking about, Class Dismissed, When Colleges Ignore Inequality and Students Pay the Price. Tony, thanks again.
Thanks again.
For being with us. After a quick break, everybody loves the ease and simplicity of using the spacious, luxurious handicap stall. But when someone who really needs it has to wait for you to finish your business, are you a jerk?
Business.
Are
Oh
you
my
an
God.
a-hole? And how about other similar instances like driving in the bus lane, the bus-only
Marjorie
lane when
does.
it's empty, or using the 15 items or less aisle at the market when you've got, say, 16 things? Am I the A-hole is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Tony, that was great. We really do hope you come back. That was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you all so much. It was awesome. Yeah, and Khalil has been
Embarrassment.
Man, I mean, especially now that President Biden's a lame duck, I don't understand the politics of this at all.
The political and legal barriers to closing Guantanamo Bay on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And The Lyric Stage, presenting Crumbs from the Table of Joy. Set in 1950s Brooklyn, two sisters mourn the loss of their mother with Hollywood films, daydreams, and lots of cookies. January 10th through February 2nd at Lyric Stage Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com. And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow with State Auditor Diana DiZoglio. Also, three-time U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky performing some of his poem Jazz for Live Music Friday. Latasha Brown from Black Voters Matter. A whole bunch of people. So be there. But right now, something that's become a Thursday tradition makes Marjorie very happy.
Does.
Am I the A-hole day? It's not a person listening, I would argue, who doesn't prefer the comfort and spaciousness, Marjorie, of the ADA bathroom or the accessible stall? But does using it when it's available make you an a-hole because someone who is disabled might be coming along any minute? And when they do come along and they complain that you're in there, are they the a-hole? You with me? That's the situation one Reddit user found themselves in. They posted their stories to the forum, Am I the A-hole? And here it is. And I must admit, I've been occasionally guilty of having done that. Give us a buzz or a text, 877-301-8970. By the way, there are other examples of the similar concept. You know, someone who drives in, let's say, an empty bus lane.
Yeah.
Are they the a-hole or the person who complains when the bus later appears? Or how about this? Everybody's encountered this. The 12-item or less checkout lane at the grocery store. You've got 20, but you look around, no one's in line. Are you the a-hole, or is it the person who comes along later and has to wait and they have only 10? So when it's convenience at that moment, is there really such a harm in taking advantage? Who's the a-hole? The unqualified user, I'll call that person, or the qualified late arriving complainer? You tell us, 877-301-8970. So let's get on the list. We
Okay.
know that you have driven in a bus lane saying, oh, I don't see any buses. Okay, so you've done that. I didn't say you're the a-hole. I'm just saying you've done that.
Oh, thank you.
Have you ever used the accessible stall even though you're not entitled to use it? Have you ever used yes
I
or no?
have. Not
Okay.
very much.
Okay,
but
I didn't
have.
ask if you have very much. Thirdly, have you ever had
You
more?
said occasionally, Jim.
I did?
Yes.
Have you ever used the checkout line when you've had more than the maximum number of items at the grocery store?
Not unless invited to by the cash out person.
That is so untrue.
It is.
Wait, you have 14 items and it's 12-item lane. You don't use the 12. You don't say, well, no one's. You look around, no one's coming. What's the big deal? I'll be done before they get here.
if there's nobody there, and they and I say,
Exactly.
can I come in? I got 14 items. I ask permission first.
No, you don't. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so who is the a-hole? The person who decides, well, since no one who's really eligible to be using this thing
Right.
is here, I should be able to use it. No harm, no foul.
Well-
or the person who is eligible, person that's got 9 items, or is disabled, or is on a bus, and they complain because you shouldn't be there to begin with. Who's the a-hole?
Our grammar's being corrected.
What is it?
12 items or fewer.
12 items or fewer. That is correct. That's
Thank
one of
you,
my
John.
pet peeves, too, by the way.
Mhm.
Thank you for whoever corrected us.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's the a-hole?
Well,
Oh, my
obviously, if there's somebody that needs the bathroom,
Well, you
who
didn't
is
know it
in
'cause they weren't there
disabled
at
in
the
some way,
time.
If they weren't there, if you go in really quick and you come out really quick.
What if they have to wait?
Well, if they have to wait like 30 seconds, it's not the end.
How
of the
about
road.
45 seconds?
Well, 45 seconds may be pushing it, Jim. You
Okay,
have to be quick.
8-7.
You can't go in there and talk on the phone. You can't go in there and change your clothes. You can't go in there.
It's the only stall that
with
person
your
can use, and they have to
girlfriends.
wait for you. There are 2 other stalls
Uh-huh.
that you would have been less comfortable in, but you could
Well,
have
you know
used
why
them.
lots of people end up using the
No, I don't,
handicap
Marjorie.
stall?
No, I don't.
Because the other ones are really gross.
Oh.
That's why. And they go in there because they are less grossed out by the
By the way,
handicap bathroom.
much more important than the question I'm
What's-
asking.
what's your-
how
what's-
many people believe
What?
that Marjorie, when she has too many items for the checkout line, asks the cashier
I
if
do.
it's okay
I do.
if she goes
I
in
do.
line?
Because,
That is totally
because
untrue.
everyone behind you otherwise is counting how many items
Okay,
you
excuse
have,
me.
and they
Oh,
caught you
wait a
red-handed.
minute. So you ask the cashier if it's okay.
Uh-huh.
When you drive in the bus lane, before you do it, do you call Phil Eng and say, "Hey, Phil,
No.
head of the
But
T,
this
can
is-
I drive
this
in
is
the
one-
bus line
okay.
lane?"
Let's you know where there's a big where's the place where you drive where there's a bus lane?
When we go to the
on
Lennox
frequently.
Hotel on 3 days a week.
What bus lane is that?
It's a bus lane in the right-hand lane of Boylston Street. You don't even know that?
Okay, at Boylston Street. But that's Jim, that's like
Oh my God.
3 blocks.
Yeah.
I'm talking about an extended area where you
Yeah.
drive. Here's the one that's a big offender.
Where is it?
Huntington Avenue.
Yeah.
If you drive down Huntington
You know, people in
Avenue,
positions of power decided there should be a bus lane there, not
that's
you.
correct. I tell you, there's going to be a big issue in the mayor's
Okay.
race. These bus lanes, a lot
Maybe there will
of hostility
be. There
about
isn't
bus
a mayor's
lanes and
race
bike
anyway,
lanes.
so that's
Well,
okay. As of now, you don't know.
As of now, but you never know.
You never know.
I mean, she's up for re-election.
She
Mayor
is
Wu
up for
Just had a
re-election.
baby like 3
She hasn't
days
called
ago or
in
something.
today. What's
She
up
hasn't
with
called
that?
in today. Well, she's busy.
Okay.
Taking
She
care
was
of her
busy
children.
yesterday, too.
But so here's the thing: you're on Huntington Avenue. The traffic is backed up like for half a mile.
You've been saying this
So
for months.
So people, instead of sitting in traffic for
uh.
half a mile, wasting all that, causing all this pollutants in the air and everything else, they sidle over to the bus lane and they go there. When there's a
Not
bus,
they, you.
they move back.
And when the bus...
I'm not the only one, Jim.
well,
let me tell
but you are the one. Is that correct?
I am one.
Okay,
Yeah.
877
You've never done that, Jim.
I haven't done that.
Oh, yeah.
877
Okay.
I don't do those
So how
kind
many
of
times
things.
have you been in the handicap bathroom?
What do you mean? No, what do you mean? I don't understand the
You
question.
said occasionally. Does this mean every time there's one available, or does this mean that you just could?
Can I answer you honestly?
Yep.
I have no recollection. I do not know.
Jim is taking the
I
fifth.
do not know or do know or whatever. Dale and Franklin, you are first. They're on AMI the A-Hole here on Boston Public Radio. Hey.
So, for the situation in the checkout line where you have a fixed number of items,
Yes.
I mean, where do you draw the line? Is it 5 more items, 10 more items,
Great
50
question.
more items?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And then when you get in back of that person and you only have 10 items, I'd say the person in the line is the a-hole.
The person who has the excess items is the a-hole.
Correct.
Oh, well,
Okay.
there's a man with strong
however,
opinions.
Dale, if you are hovering about the 12 items or fewer line, and you have 14 items, and the line is empty, and the cashier says, you say to the cashier, "Can I use the line? There's nobody here." You do it then.
Excellent question.
wouldn't
What do you
Dale?
say about that person, Dale?
You know, where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line?
That is the question we should have.
They have that quantity for a reason.
Okay.
And, you know, if it's okay for 12 items, is it okay for 15 items? Is it okay for 20 items?
You're tough.
Can I tell you,
You're very
you are
tough.
fabulous.
So what
the
Dale
question
would
is,
do-
where do you draw the line, Dale asks. Thank you, Dale.
If it's 10 items, you have 12. According to Dale, what you should do is you should stand behind the person with 5,675 items
Yes.
and not complain.
Yes, because there are rules. The rules are you don't drive in a
Rules.
bus lane if you're not a bus.
Yeah, you know-
You don't get in the 12 items
you
or
are-
fewer lane
you are on
if you have 14
thin
items.
ice over there.
Can I say
There
something?
are rules.
Can I say
have
something to you
seen
that I just came
break
up with?
More rules.
Can I just say something
as
I
a
just
driver.
came up with?
What? Go
Where do you
ahead.
draw the line, Marjorie? I may have gotten that from a caller,
Fire
but it's
lanes?
totally true. Now, there are rumors, by the way, this was like decades ago.
They're not rumors.
We were at the old radio station, and actually it wasn't even you. It was our producer, who's now a cop in Winthrop.
That's right.
But he wasn't a cop then. He was a fabulous young guy.
He's not
It's not
Winthrop,
Matt
is he? I thought
Shearer,
it
by
was
the way. Matt Shearer is
Norwell.
our other producer. Now he's a superstar at
Superstar.
BZ.
A well-deserved superstar.
I know, he's pretty good. He's
Very
not pretty good. He's great.
talented.
Yeah, in any case,
Yeah, he
didn't
used
come
to do
from
my
us. That's pretty
blooper
obvious.
reels.
What's my point? Oh, I may have paused briefly in a fire lane outside the Star Market on Marcy Boulevard one time ever.
One time.
Ever.
Okay.
Briefly.
How about the time you drove right across the middle of Morrissey Boulevard? Went up over the curb, across the center island, came down the other side.
Yeah, and I was charged with a crime and I was acquitted of one of the two charges.
I believe.
One of the two charges.
I believe that that wasn't
Guilty on one charge.
Oh, guilty
not
on one
guilty
charge. Okay,
on the other.
That's not my recollection.
Well,
Bethany
your
in
recollection
Attleboro.
might be wrong, Marjorie.
Okay.
I was acquitted on one, convicted of the other.
What does Governor Deval Patrick say about you, Jim?
Sometimes wrong, never in doubt. Thank you. Thank you. This is a very helpful conversation. Bethany in Attleboro.
Hi, Bethany.
Hi there. What's up?
Hi, Marjorie. I was very disappointed to hear that you use handicap bathrooms.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a disabled daughter.
Yeah.
I've called in a few times before, who's in a wheelchair, and one of the places we see it happen all the time is in theaters. And unfortunately, if you do that to me, you will find your stall smashed open. My daughter, who has a spinal condition, cannot hold it even for 30 seconds, which is why they've created handicap bathrooms. And a lot of times that when the theater's back, when there's a break, everyone will use it. And we've smashed doors open with her wheelchair.
Can I tell you?
Wow.
You're right. Now, I have to say.
Smash doors open with her wheelchair,
But I have to
Bethany.
say, that's I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I am thrilled you called, Bethany. I really am. Thank you for your call and your admonition. I mean, she is totally right. She's totally right. Her kid is entitled to use the bathroom, and you are not.
Somebody just confessed that they went into a bathroom, huge bathroom, totally empty, several stalls, went into the handicap one. When I came out, there was indeed a man waiting in a wheelchair. I said I was claustrophobic and slithered away. I was undoubtedly the a-hole.
Well, there you go. There's an admission. Now, Jamie raised an issue that you were unaware of before. Is there in the men's room, I don't mean to get graphic here, but since we're being
I learned
honest,
something today.
There is, at least at GBH and a lot of other places, there are two urinals. Do you know what a urinal is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, there are two urinals. There's one that is sort of urine level, and there's one that's an itty-bitty level.
Little people.
Kids or
Kids,
whatever.
exactly.
Is it appropriate for a grown man, I would be a grown man, who gets in there and says, I want to use the itty-bitty urinal, the low one, rather than the average height one. Is that a
I guess
problem?
the question is, why would you want to use the lower one when it would seem to me there's further to go and it's not a very hygienic approach?
Well, first of all, I'm not here to answer your existential questions. I'm just describing a situation, and I think it's a similar deal. By the way, there's a great Curb Your Enthusiasm bit, of course, on almost all these. It's almost like he reads the Reddit thing. Larry comes out of an ADA stall and encounters, talk about timing, a man in a wheelchair, first the man, and then, of course, Larry.
What are you doing?
Using the bathroom.
That's my stall. Did you see the placard on the
Yes, I know, but somebody was using the other one, so I...
Well, then you wait.
I couldn't wait. It was an emergency. I had to go.
There's one stall for me, and you're in it.
If you were here, I would have given you first dibs. But honestly, I haven't seen a handicapped person in the bathroom, maybe ever. So I thought I could perhaps take my chances.
A handicapped person. That's nice. Oh, that's nice.
You know what I just realized?
What?
His circumstance was when all the non-accessible stalls were being used. But that prior caller would say, I'm sorry, you're not entitled to use that, as the person in the skit said, you're not entitled to use this accessible one. You just got to wait. That's the nature of the beast. And I have to say, I'm convinced. Allison, you're in Boston. Marjorie doesn't know what I'm talking about.
I'm sort of confused.
That's okay. We're all sort of confused. Allison in Boston, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi there. Thank you.
Sure.
I do use the handicap stall when the other stalls are super small. I don't have a cane or a wheelchair, but I do have an ostomy bag.
Oh.
Sometimes you just need the extra room. Sorry if I'm grossing anybody out.
No, that's okay. It's real.
Legally, it's considered a disability, but I can't tell you the number of times I've had to justify myself on the way out of the stall. And then you should see people's faces when you tell them you have a bag. It's almost worth it. And it's a good teaching lesson.
Well, Allison, you raise a good point. They're talking in one of these stories about people with Crohn's disease or other situations that make you need the bathroom more urgently. But people can, of course, see that you are someone who's dealing with colitis or Crohn's disease like you. And so people get furious at the person, and the person is just trying to avoid a bad situation there.
Allison, we're glad you called too.
True. One other thing to toss out there. Mine's from cancer, but for Crohn's colitis cancer patients, the state of Massachusetts has a really cool law
What is
where
it?
you can use a bathroom in a retail establishment if there are a certain number of employees there and if there's no place else nearby to go. I don't remember all the details, but they did pass that in Massachusetts.
What do you mean, a staff-only bathroom kind of thing?
Exactly.
Oh, that's actually very interesting to know.
In Massachusetts, with a certain number of employees working there, and you can print something out online. And if you're shopping and have an issue, you can actually use a staff bathroom.
Allison, thanks for calling. We really, really appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Here's a texter with a strategy.
How's that?
That when I leave the handicap or kid changing room after a serious time in there, I start limping or act like I'm blind.
That is really, I wouldn't have read that.
Well, I read it. It's too late now.
Now, can we get back to a safer terrain for us where we're not going to be humiliated?
Where you drove across the center line on
No,
Morrissey
we're
Boulevard?
not talking about that anymore.
Yeah.
Again, by the way, check the records. Marjorie, as always, acquitted on one count, convicted on the other. Convicted on the other, as I've told a million times, because Marjorie was essentially a hostile witness. She was my only witness. My lawyer, I've said this before, was the president of the State Bar Association.
He was a fool around,
He said,
man.
Jim, you will be acquitted on both charges easily with Marjorie's testimony. All I can say, I was convicted of one charge. I wonder why that was. The easier one where we're not going to get ourselves in as much trouble as we're getting in. What's that?
Our note from...
Oh, read the note. It's fine.
Jamie, who got himself locked in the bathroom
For like 4 hours a couple of months ago.
ADA, the handicap
serves him
bathroom.
right.
That's right.
Okay, so as I said, let's go to the safer area because we're taking a lot of heat on this bathroom stall thing. The checkout line. I have to say, I admit I'm occasionally a rule breaker, but don't you feel guilty? And aren't you worried about being embarrassed when you're in the checkout line, which is a much more frequent occurrence? If you have more than you're entitled to.
That's why I don't do it.
Well, who cares if the cashier says yes? It's not about the cashier. It's about the other customer who complied with the rules.
It's usually because there's nobody in the line. That's why they say yes.
Yeah, well, there's always going to be another person in the line.
You know what's incredible, though? You know what's incredible? I mean, I've done this. I'm not proud.
What'd you
but
do?
I'll be behind someone in the 12 items or fewer checkout line, and I'll count their items just to make sure. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, what a fraud you are.
That's pretty bad, isn't it?
And what are you going to do? You're going to admonish them if they have too many?
I'm just checking.
To what end? To what end?
I don't know, but I'll do it. It's like a tick.
You know what I do similar to that?
What?
I count the number of people in the bus line that are not buses.
You know, the next
and one
time,
is a bright blue,
next time
whatever you have.
You leave the library.
Yeah.
You take a right turn and you go down Huntington Avenue.
I know what
and
I
you
know
will
what
see
to do.
I'm talking about.
You know what I don't do on Huntington Avenue? Drive in the bus lane.
Yeah. Well, Jim drives like an old lady. We all know that.
Which is called in accordance with the law.
Uh-huh.
Ed in Lexington, yourself. Ed in Lexington, are you? Yes, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hello there. Hi.
Well, hey, thank you guys very much. My wife and I love your show.
Well, thank
we
you.
are in that category of diminishing listeners, long-time listeners, first-time callers. So
thank
very
you.
much.
God, we love that.
So Jim, you're going to love this because it's in your neighborhood. It's about the checkout line, the Whole Foods there in Central Square.
Yeah.
This guy puts like 30 items on the belt, and the cashier looks up and says, "Look, you're either from MIT and can't read, or you're from Harvard and can't count."
It's actually, is that true?
one.
Is that a made-up story or is that real?
I think it's, it's an urban legend, but I thought you'd appreciate it.
It's a good one, Ed. Thanks to you and your spouse for checking us out. We really appreciate it. Keep listening. Thank you, Ed from Lexington.
I think this issue is going to give Jim a heart attack. He's all revved up. Yikes, says Jackie from Sharon.
Well, for the most part, by the way, I am, you mock me, which, as I say many a time, is one of your favorite pursuits. I am mostly, would you agree that I'm mostly a rule complier?
No.
Okay, well, then there. I'm just asking.
I would not.
It took you a
Not
long
for
time
second.
to answer
This
there.
is what Judy in Danvers says. There are stores with about 12 item signs at the checkout. Have you ever seen that?
Wait, about? No. No, maybe, no. Bob from New Hampshire says, this is really fascinating. It's handicapped accessible, not handicap only. I think you might be. I use them all the time, but goes on to say it's bus only.
That's right.
Not bus accessible. Marjorie is the a-hole.
And everyone says
Bob
on
from New
the
Hampshire
a-hole. And
says-
I'll tell you the same thing I tell Jim. You go Huntington Avenue, Bob, when it's like bumper to bumper traffic and that glistening empty bus lane with no bus in sight, 5 blocks behind you, 10 blocks in front of you. Temptation is overwhelming.
can I also? This is an
A lot of
incredibly
people are
important
saying that
issue. What?
handicap stall means it's handicap accessible. It does not mean.
Well, I don't think that's true.
only
And by the way, based on those 2 calls, I'm not doing that ever again. Let me
Okay.
just say this. This is a huge issue.
What?
Bill from Bridgeville, this is a brilliant question. Is a 6-pack 1 item or 6? Now,
Wow.
wait a second. I can tell you my favorite supermarket. I like Whole Foods.
it's
We know
one.
Market Basket. Well, when I go there, if I do not have 6 lemons in a bag,
Gonna put them in the bag.
but I have 6 lemons, and they see that there's 6 lemons, occasionally a cashier will say, that is 6 items.
6 items.
6 items.
You're screwed.
Really?
Get the bag,
So the
Jim.
bag is the issue to you, the critical issue. Is that what you say?
I think so.
Well,
You
what
gotta
if
put it
this
in the
guy,
bag.
Bill, decides to have a pop on the way into the line? And so it's a 5-pack and he's drinking one. Is that 2 items, Marjorie? What is the answer to that?
I think the 6-pack is always 1 item, Jim. That was what I would say. But if you don't put your lemons in the bag, rather, it's 6 lemons.
How about this?
Okay.
Bob from Ipswich, another fabulous texter, is 2 for 1. It's 2 for 1.
Okay.
1 item or 2. What do you say to that?
I would say it's 1.
1.
What would
wow.
you say?
I mean, if I was the
'Cause you
one
only have to ring
online,
it up
I would
once.
say it's 1.
Oh, maybe they have to ring it up twice and then deduct the second
Yeah.
cost.
If there are any cashiers listening, could you call in at 877-301-8970? Take the next call, please.
Okay, let's go to Joanne in Dorchester.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Dorchester.
Hi,
Hi,
Dorchester.
Joanne. Whoops,
Hi, you
sorry.
two. Hey, how are you, Joanne? What's up?
So I have another bathroom story, but there won't be any dilemma in this case about who is the selfish one.
Okay.
I was in a movie and the movie theater and went into women's room, and of course, as it always is, it was crowded. And this woman goes in, does her business, comes out of the stall, leaving her coat hanging in the stall to wash her hands. So nobody else can go in the stall.
Very bad.
I thought that was terrible. And when I said something to her, I said, people are waiting. You're making them wait longer. That's not fair. She was snarked back at me. And afterwards, it occurred to me that what I should have done was just gone in the stall myself with her coat, closed it up. I don't mind having a coat with me that's not mine while I'm doing my business.
That's right.
And then and serve her right. But I unfortunately didn't think about that till afterwards. So I'm getting some satisfaction from telling you this on the air.
So you're essentially someone who believes in retribution. Is that correct, Joanne? Is that what you're saying? Obviously, that is true. Joanne, that was yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent story. That is an excellent story, by the way. A really excellent story. Joanne, thank you very much for the call. Eric from Arlington, I think this question's for you. How is driving in the bus lane, he doesn't say Marjorie, but I will. How's driving in the bus lane, Marjorie, different from driving in the breakdown lane on 128? What's the answer to that?
That's an easy one because people can be in the breakdown lane for the right reasons and then you'll hit them. That's why you can't drive in the breakdown.
Well, there might be a bus
Unless
ahead of you
it's
in the bus lane.
Well, but you're only going 5 miles an hour. It's not like you're in the highway. It's a totally different thing. The breakdown lane, by the way, they do have like a 93 South, and I think sometimes on 128,
Where you can
Eric,
use
although I
it.
could be wrong, they say between 3 and 7.
Yeah, but what are you supposed to
can use
do if you do break down between 3 and 7?
Well, I've often
What do you
wondered
drive into
that.
the grass?
Wouldn't you? I would drive into the grass. I'd drive up the hill.
You know what I
I'd
drive
be-
into? The 12 items or fewer checkout line. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
877-301-8097.
You do see a lot of people driving in the breakdown lane, though. I've seen that all the time on 93 South.
Really?
When they're going through Weymouth. Yeah,
Wow,
and the traffic
Weymouth.
gets heavy, and they're over there in that
A
breakdown
lot
lane.
of people think Weymouth is a sketchy place. And I think that's one of the reasons why they
never
think
know what goes on
in Weymouth.
in Weymouth.
And let me tell you, what goes on in Weymouth does not stay in Weymouth. I know that for a fact.
Okay,
Let's
Gwen.
go to
We have,
where
a
are we
few,
going?
we have a few friends from Weymouth.
We do?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Don't you remember those stories we heard? Gwen in Natick.
Oh.
Gwen in Natick. Thank you for calling.
Go ahead, Gwen. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Let me try to say what I said to your editor.
Please, our editor, yeah.
So there's certain points where we need rules for order in society.
We do.
That's right.
There's a certain point where Emerson said, "It's foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of." No, never mind.
Consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. That's what the line sort of is. Yeah,
right,
basically,
that's right.
Yeah.
And what
You know when he said that, when he was in a checkout line with 15 items?
Yeah. Wait. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds.
Whatever, yeah.
So the thing is, you got Marjorie there, there's no one around, and she makes a relational action and says, is it okay if I go through more? That is not a federal case. So when you start saying, well, where do you draw the line, that becomes focusing on a federal case instead of the situation.
Well, that is a brilliant point, Gwen, because somebody else just said that who does have a handicap, they said a disability, that she was willing to give the benefit of the doubt to anyone who thinks they need to use the bathroom. People need to give it a break.
Right.
And the big complainer is the a-hole. I mean, if someone is
because we're not God, we don't know. We don't know what's going on
but the
with
woman
other
who called, I found very compelling, both women, but the first woman who called said her kid in the wheelchair couldn't wait. I mean, that sort of did it for me. Move on.
Well,
Jim.
And that's the issue with colitis too, and Crohn's disease. So, but you can't necessarily see that because the person is not wearing, in a wheelchair, wearing some kind of brace or something.
Gwen, I want you to know you're the first person to quote Emerson on our show in months. So thank you, even if it isn't Emerson. Thank you very much for the call. Let's squeeze another one in here, by the way.
Okay. Edward from Milton says, Jim, if you're enjoying the spaciousness and comfort of the handicapped stall, you sure aren't going to be done in 45 seconds.
Well, yeah, I don't even know why. Why did we pick this?
Why did we pick this?
We should have done the
we
checkout
picked this
line.
Because there's a lot of really things you don't want to read on here.
No, you don't.
You know what I mean?
And you know what the beauty is? There are a lot of things you don't want to read, and then you read them. That's that. And by the way, the only way you know that there are a lot of things you shouldn't read is by reading them, I think is basically your slogan. Is that not correct?
Okay, we'll move
now,
on.
we always guess if Jared, let's stay away from the bathroom because we're getting in trouble on that one. Let's do what supermarket do you go to primarily? Whole Foods, right?
A bunch of them, but yeah, Whole Foods.
Okay, Whole Foods. Okay, a bunch of them, excuse me. Now, you're in there's a 12 items or fewer. I said less, and I apologize.
Yep.
Fewer line.
Yep.
You have 14 items. You have something really important to do, whatever cockamamie show you're going to, or whatever it is. Do you get in the line, or do you say, this is just simply not right? I don't belong in that line. I will go wait in a long line because I chose to have 14 items. Go ahead.
Well, I know you love to guess what I do. What do I do?
I would say you look around. If anybody recognizes you, you go to the long line. If they don't, you go right through the damn thing. Is that right?
You know what? I'm not smart enough to look around to see if anybody recognizes me. And in my head, the little movie I concoct is, I miscounted. I miscounted. I'm in this lane.
Very good.
And so I already have my narrative going.
That is really
So when I'm arrested and
crass.
hauled away, I have my defense.
Did you see South Rhode Island?
No.
I try to exclusively use bus lanes in my car, and I get around the city really fast.
But that sounds,
get around fast. I get around fast on bus lanes too.
You do bus lanes too?
Huntington Avenue. Am I right? By the MFA, and then as you get down to Brigham Circle,
people are tired of this
it
argument,
is like you're going 5 miles an hour.
Yep.
So people go in the bus lane.
I'm really good at having peripheral vision, and if I
That's
see
right.
there's no bus in sight,
Exactly.
So you've decided, both of you, that you know more than the mayor, the city manager, the city council
Bike
of a
lanes?
particular community.
Bike lanes is different because you could hit someone on a bike. That's different.
I wouldn't drive in a bike lane. No,
But
that's crazy.
It's huge.
Most of your cars would not fit in a bike lane, by the way. But
You can see it. Well, now
Yeah.
well, you have whole roads that
Yeah.
are bike lanes now.
Well, they
Haven't
keep
you
running
noticed
down
that?
all those white barrier things, so that it does make enough room. I have one for you.
What's that?
When you go into a museum or something that's free and they ask you, they have a little donation bucket and they suggest a donation, do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's looking, of course. You
If someone's looking.
By the way, I did one of those free museum things, and they asked me what public school I went to. And I did lie.
You said he was in the 3rd grade.
I said,
my
no, I
goodness.
said I was a senior.
You are
Mrs.
large.
I said I was a
told me to
rising
come
senior.
today.
Rising. Rising, that's right. You
Mrs.
are
Crabe,
rising.
that was my 3rd grade teacher.
Okay, fine.
Mrs. Crabe told me to come.
Okay. What are you doing there?
Quickly, we're going to be talking to Michael Cassidy. He is a law professor
I
at
know he
Boston
is.
College and was a state prosecutor. He has written his first thriller, A Legal
Trending. What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show.